across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with IG.
Hello, I'm John Pienaar with Drive on Times Radio. Thanks for joining me. A Russian spy ship offshore north of Scotland sounds a bit alarming, but actually it's quite normal, or at least uncomfortably familiar. What is truly alarming is today's parliamentary report that the UK is nowhere near, and that is an actual quote from the Defence Committee, nowhere near being able to defend itself and its allies from attack. And most worrying is the fact that warnings that the country is in no shape to defend itself from an attack are becoming familiar, even normal. Today, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, used a Downing Street news conference to reassure people, or try to, that he'd deliver what he called a new era of defence. He also rejected a warning from the Defence Committee. NATO had to be ready for the United States to reduce its commitment to NATO. The government takes a different view, said the Defence Secretary. And now the Times reports that America's ambassador to NATO has floated the possibility of handing overall command of NATO to a German commander when the European allies are ready to operate more independently of US military dominance. So surely, if we're not worried about our comparative weakness, our sheer inability to face foreign aggression, which means Russia and its allies, if it means anything, well, maybe we should be. Because a senior cross-party committee of MPs clearly is worried. And you can hear my conversation with its Labour chair, Tan Desi, in a moment. I wonder what you are thinking. Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times, or a tweet to @TimesRadio. And later on, the sheer joy among Scots, and not just football fans, at last night's last gasp victory in the World Cup qualifier, which takes Scotland into the finals in the USA next year, had to be seen to be believed. And if you're one of those who don't get the power of football to bring light to millions of lives, well, keep listening. First then, these warnings of British unpreparedness, they come on the back of signals that America is seeking a greater withdrawal from its traditional role in Europe. The American ambassador to NATO made some concerning suggestions at a defence conference in Berlin. The Times' Oliver Moody is there, and he sent this report.
There has been a controversy as Matthew Whitaker, the United States ambassador to NATO, said that the United States would like to see Germany or another large European military take command of Allied forces in Europe. This is a big deal because since 1951, when Dwight Eisenhower became the first American general to become the supreme Allied commander in Europe, that role has always been held by a four-star American general.
And here's Oliver Moody on how those comments went down.
Sitting next to Matthew Whitaker at this conference was Lieutenant General Wolfgang Wien, who is Germany's representative on the NATO Military Committee and one of the most senior generals in the German armed forces, and he openly expressed his astonishment. On the whole, though, Whitaker was very much there to spread a message of reassurance. He piled praise on Germany for brokering the new NATO spending target for 3.5% of GDP on the armed forces and 1.5% on broader security issues, and he called on the other allies to step up and be more like Germany, which is going to hit those targets, or at least plans to, by 2029.
Oliver Moody reporting there. Well, just ahead of the show, I spoke to Tan Desi, the Labour MP, who is the chair of Parliament's Defence Committee, and discussed the report his MPs had just produced.
The House of Commons Defence Committee has undertaken a comprehensive look into UK's contribution to European security. And for the last year, we've had various sessions, lots of experts inputting in their feelings on the issue. We've had several visits, and that's why the findings for us didn't make for good reading, in the sense that we just wanted to make sure that we are sounding the alarm over the UK's ability to be able to defend our homeland, and we felt that there were certain things that we may not even actually meeting our obligations, the NATO Article 3 obligations, to maintain and develop our own capability to resist an armed attack. And also, John, what we highlight is that we need to make sure that national conversation is being initiated, is being undertaken at pace by the Prime Minister, and being done on a government departmental basis.
Okay, so let me ask you about one or two of those things, Tan.
Yep.
Let me just come in here because, look, as I say, this is an alarming report. You're reporting to Parliament, you're reporting to the country, and as you say, you're also sending a message to the government. You are saying, aren't you, the government needs to wake up. They are sleeping to an extent through this threat.
Well, the government, as we've said, needs to make sure that it's actually accelerating that defence investment.
Yes.
Now,
but they need a wake-up call. That's what you're telling me.
And look, that's the job of the cross-party House of Commons Defence Committee. I think I, as chair, and other members, we would be letting down Parliament and parliamentarians who've directly elected us, as well as the British public, if we don't actually sound the alarm and lay out the truth with evidence.
In a nutshell, where do you see these frightening weaknesses? What parts of our defence are really most lacking, in a nutshell, Tam?
Well, firstly, if we look at cyber attacks, the UK is the third most targeted nation on the planet in terms of cyber attacks. It's cost British businesses the thick end of £15 billion. We've known in the last year, for example, about JLR, M&S, Boots, NHS pathology services were compromised, led to more than 11,000 appointments having to be delayed, and that actually led to the loss of a life, sadly, as well. And now that's something that we need a lot more work on in terms of integrated air and missile defense systems.
Well, you say that our missile defense amounts to next to nothing. I mean, do you stand by that? Next to nothing.
I think that if we have a concerted attack from an adversary, we are saying that we just would not be able to cope with that level of attack, and that we need to take remedial action. Also,
so our cities, our cities are therefore vulnerable to a massively destructive Russian attack of a kind that Russia are clearly capable.
Look, on our own, we may not be able to deter an adversary, especially one of much larger scale than us, but we need to work with our NATO allies. Now, it's all very well, for example, where NATO nations have said that we're going to meet the 5% target, and that's what's been set. It's not just about the government clicking its fingers and saying, we will do this. Without a very deep defence industrial base, and that takes a long time to mobilise, we just will.
And a lot of money, Tan, and a lot of money. You're talking about a big increase in spending on defence at a time when the Chancellor is scraping around for every penny. I mean, you're looking for a huge new political and politically risky commitment, in a nutshell.
Well, that's what the work of government is. We all know it's very difficult.
And when it comes to leadership, I mean, you're concerned that we are relying too much on America. You see America moving towards pulling back from NATO in Europe. And the government is saying, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is saying he sees the possibility of America disengaging differently, does not see that. And yet the Times now is saying the NATO US ambassador is talking about handing overall command of NATO to the Germans. It's always been in American hands. That must make you more concerned.
Well, these are the sort of discussions that have been had over the last year odd, and we were aware about, the American stance. It's public, it's out there, and.
But the idea, Tan, if I may, Tan, the idea of America saying they're looking at some point in the future to hand command of NATO to Germany, that hasn't been out there. That was greeted with some shock by German commanders just last night at a meeting.
Well, look, that's if we look at the fact that our own Defence Secretary, John Healey, has been taking charge of many meetings where previously it would have been a US lead. We've just got to be aware that we can't just sleepwalk into a situation where we are not ready. And I think that that's our role and our duty, our solemn duty as a Defence Committee to be doing that. And that's why
we cannot sleepwalk into greater peril. And lastly, if your message hits home, a lot of people are going to be alarmed in this country. Does that concern you, or is that what you want?
Well, it's not about alarming, it's just about laying out the reality. And if we don't invest now, we will be sorry. You're right to say that the government has many competing priorities. It's got a lot on its plate. And in the upcoming budget, we need to take cognizance of the reality with regards to defence and security. You know that our German friends, for example, known for their fiscal prudence, they've relaxed their fiscal rules with regards to defense, so solely for defense.
Yes.
And we need to be thinking of ingenious ways to ensure that we are able to accelerate that investment, while also obviously investing in public services, investing in healthcare and education. But remember, if there is no defense, if the government doesn't undertake its primary duty, everything else hinges on having a safe and secure nation.
That's Tan Jasi, the Labour MP who's chair of the Commons Defence Committee, talking to me earlier on. Now let me welcome to Drive Andrei Soldatov, the expert on Russian security and cyber at King's College London. Hello to you, Andrei.
Hello, John.
Welcome to the programme. I mean, looking at this situation through Putin's eyes, and as far as that's possible, when you look at the deployment of spy ships off the coast, we see the cyber attacks, we see a Russian aircraft straying over NATO airspace and all the rest of it. What is Putin's strategic aim? He does not surely want all-out war, so what does he want?
Well, it looks like the main strategy is to do everything what is possible, which would not trigger the Chapter 5 of and would not trigger a military response to his attacks. And unfortunately, the range of things which could be done is very wide. Only now we understand that a lot of things could be done on the sea. And the sea has been a very convenient conduit for Russian intelligence operations for many, many decades. And we all see that lots of things are going on there.
And when you say lots of things, I mean, we see a spy ship deployed here, and that presumably won't be the last time. We have seen in the past cables cut. Is that the sort of thing we're talking about?
Not only Russian merchant vessels and cargo vessels have been always used for things like deployment of agents, for moving around agents. Gordievsky at some point was, for instance, in charge of putting Russian illegals on board of Soviet vessels bound to Soviet Russia for holidays. The same vessels were used for sending back to Russia.
Right, and the Russian economy and manufacturing sector has really substantially been shifted towards military production, hasn't it? And I presume that's going to continue. The Russian economy is looking more and more like a wartime economy.
Yes, absolutely, and there is still room for that. The problem is that actually this increasing military spending provided for interesting opportunities for Russian regions. And we see that in many Russian regions, now there is a sense of more social justice than before, because the money are distributed from Moscow to the regions, and people are now are capable of buying apartments because of the military spending. So if big cities there are problems, in regions people are quite happy with the way the Russian economy is developing.
And just lastly, while this military build-up continues in Russia and this testing approach, there is always going to be a risk of a flashpoint, of maybe a war by accident, isn't there?
Absolutely. And to be honest, my biggest concern that maybe that is something Vladimir Putin counts on. He wants to provoke Europe and the United Kingdom to do something which then he would use as a proof that, you see, I've been always about peace settlement, and these Europeans and the British, they have been always trying to undermine my agenda.
Very worrying thought. Andrei Soldatov, thank you for coming on. Now, in a moment, there is, rather more cheerfully, there is a major spring in the steps of Scots after the Scottish national team qualified for next year's World Cup. We're going to just have a look and just taste some of that joy. And in a moment, less happy place where the Labour Party is concerned, we'll get the latest gossip from our political editor at Westminster, Anna Mihailova. Now, it is 4:18. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive.
Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
It's been a dismal week at 10 Downing Street. Briefing about leadership plots against Keir Starmer. Angry reaction to briefing about leadership plots against Keir Starmer. The Labour benches are not at all happy. The Labour MP Clive Lewis told the BBC he'd be willing to give up his seat to allow the leadership potential hopeful Andy Burnham into the House of Commons.
We're in a quandary. It feels like we're in checkmate, and it's hard to see a way out of it.
Is Andy Burnham up for this?
You have to ask Andy Burnham.
Have you spoken to him?
I have spoken to Andy Burnham, yeah.
But I'm not sure if he wants to move to Norwich, but would you would you give up your seat
It's
for
a
him?
question I've asked myself, and I'd have to obviously consult with my wife as well and family. But you know what? If I'm going to sit here and say, country before party, party before personal ambition, then yes, I have to say yes, don't I?
Well, that was something, wasn't it? Anna Mihailova then is our political editor at Times Radio. Hi, Anna.
Hi, John.
Hi, always keen for the latest on this. Have you got some fresh intelligence on the mood among Labour MPs?
Yes, so I've been gathering reaction around Parliament today to these comments by Clive Lewis, and I have to say it's a real mixed bag. So one MP said there's absolutely no guarantee that Andy Burnham would win, and was making that argument, and which is fascinating considering the fact that Clive Lewis has a 13,000 vote majority, and the Greens were second in that seat, but were nowhere near. So the idea that the Green Party has come so far, and of course it has in its polling, is really significant and really interesting. And then I had someone in government basically saying, "Well, bring it on then," kind of being sort of giving a lot of bravado about it. But it's got people talking, but it's got very few people talking about Andy Burnham as an option in the same way. I think the general mood has just been continuing to talk about Keir Starmer, the problems of the last few weeks, and MPs are just really, really worried about the budget next week. They're seeing that as a very, very crucial moment and point of danger.
So what are some of these MPs saying about their own future, their own thoughts about their own decisions?
So it varies. I recently spoke to one MP who talked about effectively feeling so despondent that they no longer felt it was worthwhile being in Parliament. So there's that mood. And the reason they felt like that is because they said even both on the national and local front, the party has become so unpopular that it wasn't even like they could throw themselves into local issues, they felt, and make a difference. So you've got people saying things like that. You've got other MPs effectively telling colleagues that they're resigned to being one-term MPs. And as we've discussed recently, there's a real distrust with some of the whips in the whip's office. So we've got that backbench issue continuing. Some backbenchers just do not want to talk to their whip because they're seen as too close to Downing Street. So that is a party management problem. And this is despite the fact that Jonathan Reynolds, who was put in to be chief whip, is himself popular. But of course, he runs a team which includes people like Morgan McSweeney's wife, who's seen as too close. And you've got this feeling of MPs being just waiting and seeing until next week. But the mood, as we've been talking about, is extremely low. I'd give you another interesting conversation I had this week.
Before you do, Anna, let me just ask you a bit more about that MP who certainly got my attention with that. This MP who was in I don't know, despair might be the right way of describing it. Was he actually talking about throwing in the towel and walking away, or was that just him venting about the misery?
So the discussion definitely was about throwing in the towel, but it's always quite hard to know if someone is having a really bad day and is just venting. That does happen, of course. Everyone has bad days, but it really struck me, that conversation, and it has stayed with me because it was someone who went into Parliament a few elections ago with this feeling of public service and actually trying to make a difference. Is quite a community MP and is just feeling really, really despondent. I was making the case that they thought that they would have more impact doing other work within their community than they are in Parliament right now.
All right, Anna, great to talk to you. Let's keep in close touch. Now, they are not depressed or despairing in Scotland, unless they maybe happen to be a Danish football fans, haven't made their way home yet. Scotland qualified last night for the World Cup finals after 2 goals in injury time. It meant a 4-2 win, but what a win. Fans celebrated, fireworks going off outside Hampden Park, and here is the Tartan Army at the Clockwork Bar in Glasgow reacting to that first Scottish goal. Well, even that is what a winning football side's fans sound like. But there was an extra layer maybe to that. I don't know. Daniel Patterson should know. He was there, the duty manager at the Clockwork Bar in Glasgow. Hello, Daniel.
How are you doing?
I'm well. I guess you're doing pretty well too. It sounds like an unforgettable evening.
It's an evening I think I'll never ever forget. Last time Scotland qualified for the World Cup, it was obviously back in '98. I was 6 years old at the time, so to obviously see 30 years of heartache to qualify in such an absolute roller coaster of emotions, I could describe in a manner, but atmosphere wise, what you've seen for the video there.
Yeah. I mean, look,
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. There's nothing quite like a moment like that. And there in Scotland, after, as you say, so many years of hurt, of not getting there, of being a British underdog in international football and walking behind England. And now, there you go, there's Scotland, dreaming again of taking on and beating England, the old enemy, in the finals.
I hope so. But we're there. The atmosphere in this pub last night was unbelievable. A tremendous amount of pride for the nation, the country as a whole. You see that, and you see 4 fantastic, amazing goals. And obviously to have it with my team being there to witness it, obviously with the owner being able to witness it as well. John, honestly, I don't think I'll ever forget that feeling.
I'll bet you won't. I mean,
there's not even words I can describe to say that. I mean, to celebrate that.
I can hear it, Daniel, in your voice. I've seen the goals. I haven't seen the fuller video of the game. I do want to see it. It does look like really, really something. One goal in 1,000, and then another one, and then another one, even better than that from behind the halfway line. I mean, the scenes there. I know a bit about what this might have been like because I support a team, Crystal Palace. We won the FA Cup, first time in the club's history. There were grown men all over the place in floods of tears. You haven't seen anything like it. It must have been like that and more.
Definitely. As you said, to even see grown men in tears, try to keep myself for that as well. Obviously, still having a job to do at the same time, but obviously, just an experience like that, the feeling is utter delirium, John. You should maybe get up here and get a pint for yourself.
I'll look forward to it. I'll take that as an invitation. I don't know if, Daniel,
exactly.
Did you open the bar for half an hour, maybe just beers on the house for a bit?
Up here, how can we put it? No Scotland, no party, John. No Scotland, no party.
I'll just try and put it into words. It's a slightly shaky line, Daniel, but we hear you well enough to get a real sense of what you're saying and what it was like there in the Clockwork Bar. Tell us a bit about what it means. I mean, to so many in that bar and around Scotland, around Glasgow, around Scotland and elsewhere, just Scots looking in, and a lot of people who aren't Scots are really enjoying this, by the way. It means everything, Daniel, doesn't it?
Exactly. It means absolutely everything. To basically, as you said, to be the underdog, to think Denmark, good side, are we going to do it? Are we actually going to qualify? Are we going to go? But I mean, the atmosphere-wise in here, every Scotland game is electric from start to finish. You get so many for the likes of Peterhead, Dundee, the Highlands, Shetlands, to come to this part of Glasgow where the pub is only literally a 5-minute walk away from Hampden.
Yeah,
you could hear everything, just the passion I mean, those 11 men on that park last night, not even just the 11 men, the full Scotland team should take an absolute outstanding bow. They've made a nation proud, country proud. Honestly, as my offer stands for yourself, the next Scotland game, come up here and party, and we'll show you how to do it.
I'll totally remember that, and look forward to the finals in America next year. Maybe we can, I'm looking forward to an England-Scotland game if that comes along. I will really enjoy that, I can promise you. Daniel, great to talk to you.
You as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Enjoy your time. Take care. Now, coming up in a moment, the latest from business. I'll talk to Robert Miller from the business desk of the Times, and we're going to be talking about Ukraine. There is a huge row brewing up in Ukraine to do with corruption and the leadership of the country. And we'll be talking about how nuclear power is being reused to treat cancer. Now, it is 4:31, time for the news with Laura Cook.
Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
2025 has been an extraordinary year for news, from the Middle East to America First, political resignations to populism. It's been a year of such change, but what's been the biggest story of the year? Now, you can see some of the Times' finest journalists talking exactly about that on December the 11th. Hugo Rifkin, Casey Balls, Danny Finkelstein, Trevor Phillips and Cindy Yu. They'll be there doing that, sifting through the headlines, trying to agree on the story of the year. And to book tickets, just go to thetimes.com/events. Time is 4:35.
Times Radio Business News.
And here is Robert Miller from the Business Desk. Hello to you, Robert.
Hello there, John.
Hi. So what's new in the markets, Robert?
Well, the FTSE is ending down about 30 points at the moment, 9,521. I mentioned the figure because it was only a week ago that the FTSE was closing at 9,911, just short of 10,000, and a record then. And it's down, 3.5%. So records come and go. But today, the FTSE 250, possibly good news on inflation, lower rates, bit of confidence there. That was up about 40 points. So that was to the good. I mean, the shares actually moving. Fresnillo, because gold went up after 4 days of falls, up nearly 6%, topping the leaderboard. Good news for airlines. One, oil's fallen now on the talk of Ukraine peace talks with President Zelensky holding talks over the next 2 days. It's Brent cruise down 2%, just below $64 a barrel. British Airways owner IAG, EasyJet, Wizz Air, they were all up because we also had some good results, better than expected half years from Jet2. They were up about 4%, their shares, so good news there. But because of those defence talks, naturally enough, the market sold off defence shares. So BAE Systems and Babcock International, they were down about 3 or 4% respectively. And on the rest of the market, I should mention actually, WH Smith, they had an accounting problem in the North America business in August. We knew that. Deloitte came in to do a review. They've now come and said that that is actually confined to the North America business. It's not going to spread over the whole WH Smith group. So the shares are up 7%, and the chief executive has stood down with immediate effect. So not a bad day. The pound, it's off slightly because inflation was lower at 3.6% as expected, but obviously lower interest rates. Pound dollar, it's down about 0.5% at the moment, 1.31.
Right, now Nvidia has results tonight, which is going to be a big moment.
Huge, John, huge. Yes, it comes out after 9 normal hours trading on Wall Street in New York, so before 4 o'clock there. I mean, the results that are expected, and these are well trailed, revenue, sales up 56% to 55 billion, and profit up 58% to 31 billion on the same quarter a year ago, and the shares are up at the moment. But if they don't meet those, then it accounts for 7% of the S&P 500. So it can single-handedly move those, and the knock-on effect to all the other big tech companies can't be underestimated. But if it comes in over that, then expect a rebound, because there has been a sharp sell-off over the 4 days. But it is absolutely probably the biggest moment, certainly this month. So there we are.
Okay, Robert, thank you.
Times Radio Business News.
Now, each week on Drive, this is a good thing. We seem pretty regularly to be talking about one or other medical breakthrough, quite often concerning cancer. So here's some more good news on that front. The government putting £9 million into breathing new life into spent nuclear fuel to help combat cancer. The project's led by the Medicines Discovery Catapult. It uses radionuclides to create treatments for existing cancers and might even offer hope for combating previously untreatable cancers. So well worth finding more about this. Let's talk to Professor Chris Malloy, the Chief Executive of Catapult Medical Discoveries. Hello to you.
Hello, good afternoon, John. How are you?
Well, and thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
Can you tell us a bit more then about this story, the reuse of nuclear material?
Thank you, and welcome from a London Life Sciences Week that's super high in energy, and actually high energy is one of the things that this technology delivers. The National Nuclear Laboratory in the Medicines Discovery Catapult has found a way to extract a powerful new atom called lead-212 from recycled nuclear fuels that we can then deliver directly to tumours wherever they are. We can couple them with antibodies and other targeting agents that take this atom and deliver it very locally to where the tumour cells are. And lead-212 packs a really powerful but short range and short time punch. And that's one of the special things about lead-212. It's got this half-life of 10.6 hours, which is almost perfectly in the sweet spot for a therapeutic. And these are new high-value therapeutics called precision radiopharmaceuticals. And we're industrializing those to make sure that the UK has got sovereign capacity and supply chain for this new high-value area. So bringing together large industry, Cyclife and Siemens Healthineers, small biotech companies, and taking this recycled nuclear material and making it a national asset for health.
Right, so it's not just a new source of energy for cancer radiotherapy. It's a more effective material in this way. It can provide this sort of powerful beam, energy beam, and more accurately. That is a win-win.
It most certainly is, and this isn't introducing radioactivity from outside or radiation from outside, and and in a sort of traditional way. This is delivering radioactivity inside, and in that right at the point of that tumor, targeting that tumor, getting that atom right close to it so it can pack its punch. So this is a completely new way of dealing with these diseases, and it's yet another part of our arsenal against cancer. A vital new one too. And the fact that we can take something that used to power homes and now power health, I think is extremely powerful. It is a breakthrough. This is exactly what the Catapult and the National Nuclear Laboratory are here for. And what we see here is government backing pioneers to enable a community and to do something that the UK has not done before, which is start a new area called theranostics. And theranostics is enabled by imaging, something that Medicines Discovery Catapult with the Medical Research Council is delivering to the NHS. And it both detects a tumour, then allows us to see the medicine going to the site of action, and then see the medicine working. So altogether, a far more precise set of medicines than we have had for the last 50 or 60 years.
I mean, at this stage, this early stage in this new development in radiotherapy treatment, is it possible to measure, to see measure the effects of this treatment when it comes to treating a tumour?
Yes, it is, because you have this radioisotope attached to an antibody or another targeting agent. You can see it. Imaging can see it. You can literally watch it in real time, collecting around a tumour. You can watch it as the tumour is declined with time. And that's vitally important. So it is, by definition, a precise piece of medicine, a new area of stratified medicine, and hopefully targeting those tumours which have been hard to reach so far, and represent, as I mentioned earlier on, a high value area for big pharma worldwide. And lead-212 offers really, almost a unique opportunity on top of that. So we're really pleased to be able to pioneer this technology for the UK.
And just lastly, in layman's terms, how is it possible for this beam to reach cancers that were otherwise inaccessible? Is it the power of the beam, or is it just its accuracy in pinpointing the target, as it were?
Well, in fact, it's not a beam. It is actually, you're taking the radioactive atom and attaching it to an antibody, injecting it, and that finds its way to the tumour. So you're literally carrying the radioactivity right to the tumour. Right. So it has its activity very locally, right on the surface of the cell. And so you can see that through imaging, but its activity is really local, and it is finding the tumour, whether it's the primary tumour or a tumour that's split up and disseminated across the body. The antibody will find it, taking along the radioactivity with it so that it can do its work.
Is there any obstacle then to this more effective form of radiotherapy being widely used, even universally used?
Well, there obviously is transport and logistics. One of the things around this, one of the reasons why lead-212 is so good is actually it has a relatively short, what we term half-life. So it declines in activity quite quickly because then it can be controllable. So the logistics in moving this around and making these preparations for patients is important. And part of this program, working with the likes of Siemens Healthineers and Cyclife and others, are to make sure that we understand those logistics. You can move the lead to where it's needed. You can attach it very quickly. You can get it into patients and you can see it working. And what we will do is look at the commercial and logistics aspects of that really early on in this program, so that we make sure that wherever possible, cost is crushed and therefore access is maximised.
Sounds really encouraging. Professor Chris Malloy at Catapult Medical Discoveries, thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, coming up after 5 here on Drive, President Trump is about on the edge now of agreeing to the release of those countless thousands of documents of evidence relating to Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to be crossing to Washington, D.C. and talking to a member of the House Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives. And I'm going to be talking to a health minister, Stephen Kinnock. The political row in Ukraine is building up, and I'll be talking to a legislator there from Kyiv. It's now 4:45. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive.
John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
So President Zelensky of Ukraine is having talks in Turkey with the Turkish leadership, but things at home in Ukraine are not going terribly well. 25 people were killed in an airstrike on the west of the country last night, and a corruption scandal has so far driven 2 senior ministers from office, and the knives are out for Zelensky's chief of staff. The legislators in opposition and in Zelensky's own party fear a loss of trust in the public, and some critics are pushing for a new unity government. That hasn't happened since the full-scale invasion. Kira Rudik joins us now, the leader of the opposition Holos Party in Kyiv. Hello to you, Kira.
Hello, John, and thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back on the show.
Always welcome, Kira. Now, this corruption scandal, it looks pretty serious. It's about payoffs involving the energy sector, and it does seem to have transformed the political mood, doesn't it, and cut away at trust in Zelensky.
Absolutely. You see, right now we are in the situation when we are all in Ukraine fighting for our survival. We are supporting our army. We are living with a couple of hours of electricity a day and sometimes without water supply. And at this situation, when many people are donating their last pennies to support our army, to learn that somebody is stealing from the country that is bleeding is absolutely unacceptable. It's unacceptable that they are in the government and in the president's surroundings. This is why we are calling for the re-election of the government. And right now, during the wartime, we cannot have re-election of the parliament or re-election of the president. But what we can do to show that corruption will not be tolerated and that trust can be rebuilt What we can show to the people is that there is a change, and for that we need a new coalition and we need a new government. And it is absolutely doable. We are calling right now for Zelensky to dismiss his coalition and for the oppositional parties start the negotiations about the new coalition and setting up the new government.
Right. It's right, isn't it, Kira, that President Zelensky himself is not being accused of misconduct or corruption. This is about some of those around him, close to him.
That's absolutely true. And this is why we are calling for him to do the right thing. It's his reaction that will show to people that he is eager to fight corruption and that he is eager to stand with the people. That's what he has promised, that he will not tolerate that. It is up to him to dismiss his chief of staff. It is up to him to call for his party to dismiss the coalition and go ahead with setting up a new government. And right now, this is the only way to show people that we are still all standing on the same side. It was incredibly painful, John, incredibly to learn about this corruption case that is happening at the time again when we are all suffering together. And this is why President just really needs to step up and do the right thing.
I mean, President Zelensky's personal popularity seems to have fallen, according to surveys. But this demand, though, for a new government, a new cabinet around President Zelensky, I mean, can that go very far? Because Zelensky does have a big majority in the legislature, doesn't he?
Well, right now, many members of his own party are calling for the same thing because I truly believe that they have done nothing wrong. And this massive stain is on everyone who was voting to elect this government, on everyone who was supporting president's office, etc. So again, we are not talking right now about how bad what happened is, and it's obviously very bad. We are talking about what should be the next steps for the country to be able to remain stable. And we know that president needs to have certain support so he will be able to represent us on the international arena, that the government needs to have trust and be able to work with the parliament in a normal way without having all those corruption cases brought up over and over. Prosecution needs to have a free space to continue investigation and take it to the courts. So we need to operate as a democracy. We are very proud that we still remain a democracy. There are some limitations that the wartime is putting on us, but this is honestly the only way out that I see for president and for his political party.
Now, in the meanwhile, Kira, there are reports, you'll know, on Axios of American representatives putting together a peace plan of some kind, which seems to be reportedly more to the liking of Moscow. What do you make of that?
Well, we didn't hear anything yet except like what you have heard as well from Axios. We know that there would be envoys coming to Kyiv today and tomorrow who perhaps will be bringing some details on that. And again, it gets us back to the question that president needs to have a stable government and stable parliament at the times when there is additional pressure from the outside. And this is why he needs to sort things out internally really quickly. We do not anticipate anything good, right? Because if Russia didn't agree to the proposals by President Trump for a ceasefire, they are still attacking us, and this night they have attacked a city really far west in Ukraine, closer to the borders. So why do we think that anything good can be there in this peace plan if Russia didn't agree to a ceasefire and continues the killings?
All right, Kira, it was, as always, good to talk to you. Thank you so much, and do take care. Kira Rudik there, leader of the opposition Hulus Party in Kyiv. Now, let us talk about cricket. We're on the eve of the Ashes in Australia. England set to face the Wallabies for the first time in the early hours of Friday. The cricket reporter for The Times, Elizabeth Ammon, has been following the story of an English superfan that's decided to make the trip to Australia entirely without flying. That's a 10,000-mile journey, I think. Elizabeth Ammon joins us, the cricket reporter for The Times. Hello, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon, John.
Hello. Well, that's what you call a fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the more remarkable, he's only 18. He set off in August, a week after he got his A-level results, and he will get to Australia. Well, he'll get to Adelaide, where he's attending his first Ashes test, which is the third Ashes test, around mid-December. He's going only 2 boat journeys. The rest of it's all by bus or train or hitchhiking or motorbike or camel. It's an extraordinary story.
Yeah, trains and boats, but no planes. I hope he's got a ticket, Elizabeth. It'd be awful if he couldn't get in.
He's actually meeting his parents in Australia, and they've got tickets for the 3rd, 4th and 5th, so Adelaide, Melbourne and Sydney, rather hoping they're not 2-0 down by the time he gets to Adelaide. But he's taken his cricket back with him. He's an avid cricket fan, and he's quite a decent recreational cricketer. He's played cricket at school at Manchester Grammar with Andrew Freddie Flintoff's 2 boys, Corey and Rocky. Manchester Grammar is where our cricket correspondent Michael Aston went. He's got quite a pedigree, and he's taken his bat with him, and he's playing cricket. His ambition, his aim is to play cricket with someone in each of the countries. He told me an extraordinary story of in Iran, which he had to go through on a guide. He had to pay to have a guide to go through Iran with him for 10 days. And a mullah in Iran bowled a beamer at his head, so that was a rather nice story. He then had a bit of a problem when he got to Vietnam, because he was riding a motorbike and he had an accident. And in his words, he's a very laid-back kid. He went, "I fractured my skull a bit." So he was in hospital for a bit, but he's back on his journey now.
Yeah, I mean, hoping that England aren't 2 down by the time he gets there. I hope that's not a reflection of your mood about the Ashes series, is it? I mean, I seem to be seeing a lot of optimism about England's chances. Do you share it?
Certainly there's more, there's a really good opportunity. I think I'm probably just a bit scarred by the fact that we've only won 9 tests in Australia since 1981, I think it is. It is not an easy place to go, but there is real optimism because England go with a real grit about them under this Ben Stokes team. Australia are ageing. They've got 2 significant injuries, with Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood being injured. That's 600 test wickets that they're missing out on. They really need to hit the ground running really hard at Perth. They're going to hit them with pace with Jofra Archer and Mark Wood, and going 1-0 up will give a real psychological advantage to England.
Yeah, I mean, Wood and Archer, it's not a bad paced lineup, is it? And Ben Stokes is going to be key, isn't he? Is he going to be fit enough?
Well, I mean, he says he is, and he looked fit in the warm-up game. They just had one warm-up game last week at Lilac Hill in Perth. And he got through plenty of overs, took 6 wickets. He looks fit and firing, but he hasn't got through a whole series for quite a while. But he should be fit to start with. I mean, Mark Wood, who knows? He's not played any red ball cricket for about 16 months or something. So it's fast bowlers are a problem. But Ben Stokes will be key. Having him as that fiery all-rounder, the kind of talisman of the team. And if he can't bowl because of an injury or something, that really disrupts their plans and the whole balance of the team.
Yeah, it'll be a needle match, which is one of the reasons we love the Ashes. I mean, I see the Australian press are really going after Stokes the way they do.
Yeah. I mean, it's hilarious, this sort of phony war beforehand, and they called him Captain Cocky, and they called Joe Root, who is the 2nd highest run scorer in Test history, Average Joe, which is hilarious. I mean, it's all part of the fun. It's really good fun. And because the last Ashes was disrupted by COVID, there were no England supporters there. So there are around 40,000 going to be attending over the 5 tests. It should be a really exciting series, really hard fought, and there will inevitably be some flare points.
Yeah, I'm a really bad sleeper. I'll be watching. And what's your prediction?
Oh, I'm going to not be very popular, but I think it'll be 3-1 Australia.
Oh, no. You really didn't have to say that, but I appreciate your honesty. Elizabeth Ammon, great to talk to you. More coming up on Times Radio.
across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the times.
It is 5 o'clock. I'm John Pienaar here with Times Radio Drive, and here are the headlines. A former Metropolitan Police officer has been found guilty of molesting a girl and raping a former partner. And Labour's NHS reforms are being compared to the mismanagement of the HS2 railway project by a committee of MPs. And coming up here on Drive, we're going to be heading to Washington, D.C. and the House of Representatives Oversight Committee as Donald Trump's pen hovers over the document that would release or give his authority to release the Epstein files. The Health Minister Stephen Kinnock joins us to talk about the mood in the Labour ranks and England's first men's health strategy. And when is it okay to head to a bar by yourself?
This is Times Radio.
And here's the news with Laura Cook.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
On DAB Digital Radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with IG.
It's good to have your company on Drive on Times Radio. I'm John Pienaar. Years after the billionaire paedophile and sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein died in jail, his one-time friend, President Trump, is finally on the point of agreeing to the release of countless thousands of documents of evidence, names, dates, correspondence, emails, above all names, all of it. That's not what Donald Trump wanted. He resisted hard till eventually lawmakers in Washington, Congress members, senators on both sides, forced his hand and the president gave way. Still, Trump insists he has nothing to hide from his friendship with Epstein. He's calling instead for an investigation of Epstein's past associates who happen to be Democrats, men like Bill Clinton. Now, there's legislation demanding full publication of the Epstein files, and all that's missing is that Trump signature. So, what next? What will the files show when they're opening? Now, during Donald Trump's Oval Office meeting with Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia Mohammed bin Salman, the president raged at a female ABC reporter for asking about Epstein.
You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. And I guess I turned out to be right. But you know who does have? Bill Clinton. Larry Summers, who ran Harvard, was with him every single night, every single weekend. They lived together. They went to his island many times. I never did. Andrew Weissman, I hear. All these guys were friends of his. You don't even talk about those people. You just keep going on the Epstein files.
So that was President Trump yesterday, visibly again irritated about the pressure to release in full the Epstein files, hundreds of thousands of documents of them. Now, what's going on here? So the president is saying, don't look at me, don't look at those around me, look at those Democrats, look at those others who he accuses the media of ignoring, and Bill Clinton is just one of those. So when it comes to it, if there is a Department of Justice investigation, will that have an impact on the amount and the kind of documents that are eventually released, even as and when the president signs the legislation to release the documents? I wonder what you are hoping to see when that time comes. Tell me what you think. Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times, or a tweet to @TimesRadio. And maybe an email to studio@times.radio, or you can tell us what you're thinking in your own way, in your own voice on WhatsApp. Keen to hear you as well as read what you are thinking at any given moment. On WhatsApp, it's 0333 003 2353. And tell me about your interest in this story. I mean, President Trump, again and again, he's been arguing this whole thing is a diversion. It's a diversion from Democrat issues the Democrats don't want to discuss. I mean, do you believe that? Do you think it is really a scandal still waiting to be opened up wide? Why are you interested? What are you hoping to see that you maybe have not yet seen, if it is there to be seen? Send me a text, send me a tweet. Join in the conversation. We're going to be talking in a minute then to Suhas Subramaniam. He is the Democrat Congress member who is on the Oversight Committee in the United States Congress and has been pushing very hard for this moment. For so long, this congressman and others have been saying, look, we need these papers open. The president has been brushing aside those demands, and then the thing changed suddenly. Suddenly more Republicans were joining in that chorus. Suddenly, there was another Democrat in the House, having taken her seat in the state of Arizona. The numbers were there. There was going to be a vote to open up the papers. Only now, there were Republicans joining in the demand. President Trump, pretty much at that moment, decided he was going to go with this, change his position, change his tone, change his argument altogether, and say, look, nothing to hide here, open up the papers. And right after that, what happened on the other side of Capitol Hill in the Congress building, the Senate. The United States Senate also decided they wanted the papers to be opened up as well. And in the end, that vote went through overwhelmingly. So all that's missing, as I say, is the president's signature. He just has to put his name to this piece of legislation, and then the way will seemingly be clear to get these papers published in all of their multitudes, their enormous bundles of documents. And then we'll find out, or will we? Because the president has also, at the same time as all of this, been saying he wants Department of Justice inquiries into others, not around him, not around his involvement, but concerning Democrats like Bill Clinton, who he claims have been the story all along. I wonder if you buy that. In a moment, we're going to find out what this Democrat congressman thinks about this too. But I wonder what you are thinking. Join in this conversation, because we're going to be talking about it after 6 o'clock here on Times Radio, when I'm going to be talking to a journalist, a Politico journalist in Washington, D.C. We are always going to D.C. when the story is bubbling, and it does seem to be bubbling pretty much all of the time. And while we're there, by the way, we can talk about the way the president has been dealing with some of the media around him. And the short summary for that is pretty aggressively. We saw the president putting down an ABC network journalist pretty ferociously in the Oval Office. And there was that spat, that blast at the journalist aboard Air Force One. Reports, the sound says he's calling a journalist Miss Piggy, called her Piggy, told her to be quiet. Well, that's part of the conversation we're going to be having after 6:30. Right now, I can welcome to the programme Congressman Suhas Subramaniam. Hello to you. Hello, I think we got a clear line to you now. Can you hear me nice and clearly? I'm not sure that line is very secure. We may go, but we're going to just try and re-establish that connection, and we'll be talking then to someone at the very heart of this discussion. I think we now have a line clear to Suhas Subramaniam, the Democrat congressman. Hello to you. No, still not sure. Sometimes happens when it comes to these live connections, whether they're transatlantic, sometimes when they're just across the road. But this one seems to be a bit troublesome. So apologies for that. I'm sure you will understand. I mean, the story, as you can see, isn't going to go away. It's worth hanging on for this. I believe and hope, because, and I'm told we can now talk. Let's see if this works this time. Third time lucky. Congressman, welcome.
Hi, how are you doing? Sorry about that.
Hi, no problem at all. These things happen, especially with these connections. I want to ask you first then about the Epstein papers. It's gone through Congress, Senate, and the House of Representatives, waiting for the president's signature. Do you believe, Congressman, we are now on the very edge of a major new scandal?
We'll see. I mean, I always say let's follow the documents. In this case, the Justice Department still won't release the documents. But what we're doing is we're going to continue to pursue all the information we can. And so in this case, we still have more production from the Epstein estate that we're waiting to hear back from. We finally got the Republicans to agree to subpoena the banks that Epstein worked with. The victims told us that that would be a huge breakthrough to follow the money. That would tell a story about Epstein's crimes. And so certainly we've had a lot of breakthroughs over the last couple of weeks, and it's all because of the pressure of Democrats on the committee wanting to pursue this, despite it being so uncomfortable for Republicans. But I certainly think we're on the brink of making more breakthroughs in the story.
Well, there's certainly a huge amount more evidence coming out, assuming it does come out in the way that you hope. There is a curious, contradiction here, if contradiction is exactly the right word, because the president, having for so long argued there was no need for full disclosure of all this Epstein material, now says, no, nothing to see here, just open them up. But of course he doesn't need legislation. He doesn't need to sign anything. He could just say, open it up. He has the authority.
That's exactly. I mean, there's been contradiction after contradiction. On the campaign, he kept saying to release the Epstein files. over and over again. And many of the victims actually voted for him, thinking he would be doing that. And yet, when he got into office, he decided not to. And then he's sort of stonewalled. And on this very vote, he said he's tried harder than I think any other piece of legislation to tank this bill, to make him release the files. And then, of course, he comes out and supports it once he realizes he's going to lose. And now it's going to his desk. He has the opportunity to sign it, and we'll see what he actually does. We've had rumors that he may be tampering with the evidence as well, and so we're concerned about that. We're also concerned about whether he will actually release all the files or whether he'll pick and choose which files to release. And so there's a lot of concern still, but certainly we have a lot of victims who have been so incredibly brave and have helped us in this investigation. They finally feel like they have a voice, and we certainly have other areas that we're going to investigate, like the financial documents and like the estate.
Congressman, what do you mean by rumours of the documents being tampered with? If you mean bits being rubbed out, as it were, before they can be produced at the order of Congress, surely that would be misconduct, serious misconduct, wouldn't it?
Oh, that would be serious misconduct, and we have serious concerns about it. And we had heard, there's some online chatter about a facility in Winchester, Virginia, which is close to where I live, and how there might be some tampering and destroying of evidence or documents there. We don't know if it's true.
Would you have any evidence? Do you have any compelling evidence of that?
No, we don't, but we have concerns. Absolutely. I think I wouldn't put it past this administration to do that. Frankly, this administration hasn't been forthcoming at all with releasing the files. If they wanted this to go away, if they were truly good actors, good faith actors in this, they would simply release the files, and they have not done that.
Okay, the president has been talking about a Department of Justice investigation into Bill Clinton and others. Is it possible that could become an obstacle to full disclosure?
Yeah, I think he's trying to put up as many obstacles as possible to full disclosure. One thing he may legally argue is that because he's doing this investigation, that he shouldn't release the files and only release files that he wants to release. And certainly that's not exactly what we're supposed to be doing here. And he criticized Joe Biden of the very same thing when the Biden administration was investigating Ghislaine Maxwell, if you recall. The Biden administration wasn't releasing files because they didn't want to tip off Maxwell and her team on their strategy or on what evidence they had until the appeals process was exhausted. But then, certainly now we're seeing Donald Trump do the same tactic, only instead of aiming at someone who has perjured themselves and convicted of horrible crimes, he's aiming it at political opponents essentially. And so, certainly we're going to put pressure on him.
Okay, Congressman, do let us keep in touch on this. Suhas Subramaniam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, let's get back to politics here, and welcome to Drive, the Health Minister, Stephen Kinnock. Hello to you, Stephen.
Hello, good evening, John.
Good to have you here. I want to hear your thoughts on some new healthcare plans for men in particular, but I do want and need to ask you about the wider situation in your party and in your government, because we've been seeing, and you've been seeing, of course, so many reports of, well, among other things, a large group of MPs, the Tribune group of MPs, who say they've got 80 MPs willing to trigger a leadership contest. And our own political editor, Anna Mihailova, has been talking to an MP who's talking about standing down from Parliament in despair. And I've lost count of those accounts of your colleagues who believe the Prime Minister may be running out of rope. Stephen, do you think the Prime Minister can pull out of this tailspin?
I think all of these things are just noises off, John. We've got a huge job of work to do to dig the country out of the hole that was left by the Conservatives after 14 years of neglect and incompetence, and we're completely focused on that. Just look at what we're delivering in the Department for Health and Social Care. Waiting lists down by 230,000, first reduction in waiting lists for 15 years. Yes. 2,500 more GPs on the front line. We're delivering a new strategy on dentistry, and then more broadly across the economy, great news that inflation's come down by 0.2% today. Yes. We hope that may lead to a reduction in interest rates. We put the minimum wage up for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of workers across our country. We're getting the economy back on its feet and fit for the future, as we are for our public services.
Yeah.
So that is a pretty hefty inbox to be dealing with, John, and to be frank, that it takes up more than 100% of our time.
Okay, I mean, I hear what you say, and I recognise you have got progress to report in various areas, and yet you surely cannot deny the party, the government, still needs to persuade the country that this government has got a purpose, and so does the Prime Minister. He's failed to get people behind a common cause. Do you think he can do that at this stage?
Absolutely he can, and he is. I think if you look at his conference speech, where he set out very clearly the dividing lines between what we stand for as a social democratic or democratic socialist party, whichever way you want to look at it, in terms of those dividing lines around the values that unite our country rather than exploiting the division and grievance that you see from parties like Reform and the Conservative Party in its current incarnation. So, that is the North Star for us.
But look at the polls, Stephen. Look at
we're
the polls.
in a battle for the soul of our nation.
Well, a battle for the soul of your nation is not a wrong way of describing it. You are in such a battle, and the polls suggest you're losing it.
Well, opinion polls come and go. To be frank, they're a snapshot of where public opinion might be at a particular moment in time. The only real poll that matters are the ones where people go to the polling booths at a general election, or indeed the elections in May. They're very important elections as well. We certainly should remain very focused on that. Of course, in Wales, as a Welsh MP, I'm very proud of the fact that we've given the Welsh Government, through the UK budgeting process, the biggest uplift to the Welsh budget since 1998, since devolution began, and that is being used very effectively by the Welsh Government. We're seeing a reduction in waiting lists in Wales and a range of other really important measures, massive investment in our train infrastructure in Wales. These are the things that start to make a real difference to people's lives. As and when they make that real difference, I am absolutely convinced we will start to see those opinion polls turning around.
And there you yet have the Public Accounts Committee really deeply concerned about the progress that's being made or not being made when it comes to waiting lists.
Well, that Public Accounts Committee report, with all due respect to the members of that committee, it covers the period 2022 to 2025. They are comments and analyses and data that relate to the performance of a previous government. So I think there's been some misreporting on this issue, where we somehow seem to be getting dragged into the orbit of this report, whereas in fact it is a report that focuses on a period before this Labour government came to office in July 2024.
But it does point to a continuing problem when it comes to tackling waiting lists.
Well, waiting lists have reduced by 230,000 since July 2024. That's the first reduction in waiting lists for 15 long years. We, of course, are not being helped by these strikes. Unnecessary, irresponsible behaviour on the part of the BMA resident doctors, and that is very disappointing. But in spite of that, we're still managing to hit targets at the rate of 95%. So I'd really like to pay tribute to the staff, the clinicians, all of the medical staff that are doing such sterling work to keep us on target, to keep us on track, and to serve the people and the patients that we are here to serve.
And do tell us a bit about your plan to encourage men to seek help or medical advice, which so many men seem to be reluctant to do.
Yeah, we're really proud to be launching the first ever men's health strategy today. It's a landmark strategy which goes across a range of issues, both mental health and physical health, particularly around mental health, where we're looking at the issue of suicide. It's really one of the most shocking statistics of all that suicide is amongst the biggest killers of men under the age of 50. So the plan includes a lot of really exciting and dynamic new ways of working on these issues, but two or three in particular. One is that we've got a partnership with the Premier League, where we're going to be advertising talking therapies and the online mental health support tool, suicide prevention, at football matches. Really a great place, I think, to go and meet a lot of men in spaces where they wouldn't normally expect it, but where that's clearly an important place for them to be. We've also got a £3 million programme which is outreach to different groups that might be harder to reach and engage with in terms of mental health. And then there's also a programme focused on middle-aged men, where there's an increasing problem about mental health and a real focus focus on suicide prevention in particular. So it's about raising awareness. It's about sort of saying to men, silence is not strength. It actually is stronger to be able to reach out and to be open about your emotions and your feelings, something that men are not always the best at doing. And that, I think, is about challenging that stigma about men reaching out, the stigma around men's mental health, and changing the way in which we see mental health and opening up as a really important part of dealing with these really quite worrying trends that we're seeing in society.
It is certainly an important message. Stephen Kinnock, Health Minister, thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Now, let me just pick up on the story of Ukraine that we touched on earlier on. Reuters is reporting that America has signalled to President Zelensky Ukraine must accept a US-drafted framework to end the war with Russia that proposes keep giving up territory and some weapons. That's from two people familiar with the matter. The sources said the proposals included cutting the size of Ukraine's armed forces, among other things. Washington wants Kyiv to accept the main points of this plan. Now, in a moment, the latest rumours ahead of Rachel Reeves' budget next week. I'm going to be looking at job losses ahead of the future of a Scottish chemical plant and researchers finding out the origins of kissing. It's 5:24. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio.
Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
It is 5:25.
Budget preview on Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
Right, latest signs and signals on the budget now with Ian King, Times business columnist. Hi to you, Ian.
Evening, John.
Hi, so let's catch up on where we are. Now we're hearing about mansion taxes.
Yes, that's right. I mean, what seems to have set this particular hare running, and bear in mind, there's been a lot of speculation for a good while now that the Chancellor would look to bring in some sort of mansion tax or some sort of levy on more expensive homes. But what's really added fuel to the flames is the suggestion that on Monday evening, the Chancellor had around 30 Labour MPs around to number 11 Downing Street for the usual fare of sort of cheese straws and warm white wine. And during the conversations there, she told them that there would be some sort of mansion tax or some sort of levy on expensive homes. And one of these MPs has apparently said, look, we were given lots of charts by the Chancellor to brandish around the time of the budget, which will show that she is hitting, to use that tedious, terrible expression, those with the broadest shoulders.
Yes.
They will be whacked, and it will be with their property. Now, what we don't know, John, is how this is going to work. And there are several options doing the rounds. One is that simply there'll be an extra dollop of council tax on homes in bands F, G and H. That is one suggestion. Another is that £500 million, that homes where they're worth between around 1.5 million will get hit by another percentage point, an extra tax instead of council tax. We just don't know. But I know that a couple of the big estate agents, Savills and Hamptons, are saying that if you go down this route of hitting bands F, G and H, you potentially hit homes as low as £1.4 million. So you're talking around 2.4 million homes in total that are in those housing brackets. So a lot of speculation there, but there feels like there's something to it.
Okay, only, 7 more sleeps before the budget? Looking forward to talking about that with you then to Ian. Ian King, thank you.
Budget Preview on Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
Okay, the budget then getting closer and closer. Maybe we should take our mind off it for just a minute. Let's think about kissing. Scientists say the first kiss could be older, far older than we ever imagined. Going back maybe 21 million years. There's a new study from Oxford University suggesting that our distant ape ancestors were already, partaking in a little bit of mouth-to-mouth friendliness long before we came along. The researchers have been tracing kissing, not just in the human species, but others, chimps, wolves, even polar bears, apparently. I can welcome now to the studio Dr. Matilda Brindle, who's an evolutionary biologist at Oxford University. Hello to you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. So kissing then goes back millions upon millions of years, and it seems humans are not the only species that likes a snog.
That is absolutely true, yes. So our research looked into kissing across the primates, but actually it's not just the primates that kiss. As you mentioned, it's been observed in polar bears, wolves, prairie dogs, even albatrosses and ants seem to kiss. So that actually kind of blew my mind when we found that
It kind of has mine as well.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, kissing polar bears and kissing ants, that is really, really a thought. So then surely, what I know about these matters is less than nothing. But when you see that sort of common behaviour pattern across all these species across millions of years, there has to be some biological explanation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. We really wanted to look into this, and unfortunately there just aren't enough data out there to do this really thoroughly. So we ended up just looking at the evolutionary history, which is something we could do with the data. But there are some theories out there. So this paper is almost a bit of a cry for help for biologists to get out there and start recording kissing behaviours when they see them, because we know it happens, but it's not really written down that much. But some of the theories for why kissing might have evolved are, they're different actually, depending on whether it's a sexual kiss or a platonic kiss. So for sexual kissing, it might actually be a form of mate assessment. So individuals might be kissing each other before they make the investment of reproducing together to kind of check the quality of their partner.
In what sense? I mean, they're tasting their DNA, or what are they doing here?
I guess it would depend on the species, but it could be something as simple as smelling each other's breath. And so if they smell unwell, then they might want to swerve mating with that partner. But humans, our sense of smell actually isn't that amazing. Other animals will have far better developed senses of smell.
I'm going to start sounding like the slowest member of your class. But there is clearly a difference between the way lovers kiss mouth to mouth and relatives and friends kiss.
Yes.
Quite often not mouth to mouth, which suggests that that concept, mouth to mouth, is part of it. That does suggest a physiological purpose.
Yeah, and that's when we were doing this study, we needed to define kissing. We needed to do it in such a way that it was applicable across a broad range of animals. It would be very easy to define it, exactly what it looks like in humans, and that's not necessarily going to work for something like a polar bear that doesn't have a flat face and prehensile lips. So there does seem to be something important about this mouth-to-mouth kiss, and that's how we defined it, and that's how we kind of got at this evolutionary history.
But it's still a mystery.
It is. The adaptive function is still a mystery, but what we do know is that it has a strong evolutionary signal, and it goes back up to at least 21 million years in the ancestor of all of the large apes.
Unravelling the mystery of the kiss. Thank you, Dr. Matilda Brindle from Oxford.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you. Now, coming up here after 6 on Pienaar and Friends, we got the Sun on Sunday's Kate Ferguson, and the Mirror's Mikey Smith, and also going to be looking at America. How ready must Britain be for the United States to disengage in some way or to a large extent from NATO? And we'll be talking about the future of factory jobs in Scotland as that plant in Fife prepares to close. Now it's 5:32. Let's get the news with Laura Cook.
Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
Now, the Russian embassy in London has now issued a statement about the Russian spy ship Yansar just off the Scottish coast. The statement says Russia's actions do not affect the interests of the UK and are not aimed at undermining its security. And meanwhile, reports are coming in that the United States and Russia have put together a new peace plan for Ukraine and that America intends to push Ukraine to accept a framework which would include Kyiv giving up territory and some weaponry. We can get the thoughts now of Matthew Saville, who's a leader in military science at the Royal United Services Institute. Hello to you, Matthew.
Good evening.
Hi. Can I ask you first then about this plan, this new latest Ukraine peace plan put together between Russia and the United States? It does seem as if it's clearly more to the liking of Moscow, which I guess means just by extension that it's going to be less to the liking of Kyiv.
I mean, you might make that deduction based on Russia's objectives thus far. I mean, I should say, we don't know much more in terms of details on this other than that which is emerging in the media. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of denial on some of it. I think it's probably a little bit worrying in terms of what seems to be the mood music that neither the Ukrainians nor the Europeans, who have done a lot of heavy lifting recently to try and keep the US engaged, appear to necessarily be on the inside track of this. And so we might be back in a situation we were a few months ago, which is at risk of a deal being imposed over the head of the Ukrainians as they are looking down the barrel of a difficult winter and slightly on the back foot on the ground in Ukraine.
I mean, we have seen before, really quite recently, President Trump seeming optimistic about some sort of agreement being achievable, and it turns out what Moscow want is, well, all of their terms. They want the removal of the government in Kyiv. They want to remove, effectively, Ukraine's ability to defend itself and neutralise it as a military power, and other demands utterly unacceptable to Kyiv, despite the president's former optimism.
Yes, and it could be that this is just playing for time again, bearing in mind that Russia still seems to regard itself as having the stamina to outlast the Ukrainians. It's also worth reflecting on the fact that the progress it's made in the past 12 months have been incredibly expensive in terms of Russian lives, and there is damage to the Russian economy and its energy industry being inflicted by the Ukrainians. But certainly we think that they do have a fallback position, which is even if they can't topple the government, if they can break the Ukrainian will to resist and make them economically non-viable, independent of Russia, that is nearly as good as what they were trying to do previously. And a lot of this negotiation could therefore be playing around at the margins or just seeing whether they can dangle something enticing enough that the US, if you like, adds to the pressure on Zelensky, who's obviously facing a lot of internal pressure at the moment over corruption charges.
Right. Now, Matthew, let me just ask you about this report from the Defence Committee of MPs at Westminster, which talks about our country being nowhere near, they use that phrase, nowhere near ready to defend itself against an attack. Now, the language was pretty stark, pretty startling, except that if we had been getting into this condition of being hopelessly unable to defend ourselves as a country or as part of NATO, that must have been becoming steadily more apparent over years.
Yes, it certainly has, and there's been concern in the MOD and across government over what you might call the thinning out of our capabilities. I think it's worth treating this report in some respects as a bit of a stocktake against the SDR and against government rhetoric. The starting position would be is if the UK came under direct physical attack of the kind that Ukraine has, we would be part of a NATO alliance. So if Russian aircraft were attacking the UK, they would have to run the gauntlet of northern European countries' air defences and their own aircraft. So it's not that the UK is alone, but the issue is if we face that kind of scale of threat, we have very thin defences and in some cases gaps with which to protect ourselves. So we do have quick reaction alert aircraft to put up, but not many.
Yeah.
We do have a ship and a submarine to patrol our waters, but if we faced a serious attack, we would be heavily dependent on others to help us.
I mean, all the logic of what we're hearing from the Defence Committee, and it's supported by other experts, including former generals and academics, is that what is needed is a massive and very quick upgrade in our defensive capability, which would mean a political and economic, and on the part of the public, a psychological upheaval.
Yes, and I think that's actually at the core of what the report says, which is that the government has talked a good game, and it said, for example, we need integrated air and missile defence, which we fundamentally lack at the moment. But that rhetoric isn't been followed by the pace and the rate of investment. Lots of the increases in defence are probably still a couple of years away. I wouldn't be surprised if finances are so tight that we still see some cuts in the near term. And in the meantime, that public debate, that educating the public around what is and isn't a threat, without being alarmist, hasn't really taken place. And in that context, maybe what the Defence Secretary was doing today was preparing people to actually understand that.
All right, Matthew Saville at the Royal United Services Institute. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, let's talk about the job losses coming in Scotland. Around 200 jobs, more than 250 contractor roles are now at risk as ExxonMobil's chemical site in Fife is set for closure in February. The company blames the UK's economic and policy conditions for the site becoming uncompetitive. Government says there won't be any money offered to try to keep that site open. And we can get the thoughts of Melanie Ward now, the Labour MP for Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy. Hello to you, Melanie.
Hi, John.
Hi, welcome. Do you see a future at all for this plant and for those threatened jobs?
Well, yesterday's news about ExxonMobil's plans to close the Fife ethylene plant are absolutely devastating for many of my constituents who, in many cases, have worked there for decades and have served the company for decades, and also devastating for our wider community. And the focus today and going forward has got to be firstly on, can we possibly find a buyer who could take over the plant? ExxonMobil closed an ethylene plant like this in France last year, and in that case it was possible for the company to find a buyer that took over the plant and saved many of the jobs. So that's what our full focus has got to be on here, and then also on bringing together the UK government, the Scottish government, the local authority and lots of other relevant actors in a new Moss-Moran task force that I want to be set up to see what can possibly be done to give proper support to all of the workforce there.
Right, so a new buyer would obviously be a great thing. But then we have the chair of ExxonMobil, Paul Greenwood, saying it would take nearly £1 billion to make the plant profitable. That is it looks like a huge obstacle to a potential buyer.
Well, yes, and I have to say the company has unfortunately been saying different things to different audiences in the past couple of days. I went to visit the site, the Fife ethylene plant at Moss-Moran in March, and when I visited, I specifically asked about the future prospects for the site. How secure was it? How secure were the jobs there? Because they are so important to my community. I was told that things looked good, it was all looking rosy. And then a few weeks later, I found out that that wasn't in fact true. And in recent months, I made huge efforts to make sure that ExxonMobil had access to the highest levels of government in an effort to see what could government possibly do that might secure the future of the plant and the future of the jobs there. And unfortunately, the company did not put forward one single proposal that would have helped to save the jobs. So it's extremely distressing. And that's why we've got to focus on what we can possibly do to try and preserve any jobs there.
So for you, the responsibility lays entirely with the company, because the government, the business minister earlier on was saying there was no realistic business plan to go with investment. You think it is up to the company to answer for that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to remember this is a US petrochemical giant. They made a profit last year of £25 billion. So if they want to invest in this site, they've got plenty of their own funding that they could do that with. What I think is actually happening here is that the company has got a new European strategy. As I mentioned before, it closed down an ethylene plant in France last year. And back in September, somebody close to the company briefed the FT that what was actually happening was the company was facing increased pressure from China and so was looking to close down all of its European operations. So that seems to be what's actually happening. Either way, you know, as I say, the government and myself have made every possible effort that we could to try to find a way for ExxonMobil to stay there. If it's not going to do that, it needs to give some time to try and find a buyer and to do what we can to preserve the future of the site and the jobs.
But what about the argument from the company that the government's environmental, green and economic policies are what's holding back any sort of helpful action? What do you say to that?
Well, I would say, as I say, the company did the same thing in France last year, which obviously has a different government and a whole different set of policy regimes. I think this is about a new European strategy. And the company says that the plant at Mossmoran has actually been loss-making for the last 5 years. Obviously, that spans different UK governments. So, it's unfortunate that they're saying different things to different people about what's behind this. It would be great if the company could now be straight, if it could have been straight all along about its intentions. That would have perhaps enabled the government and others to get behind looking for a buyer more quickly than it actually has.
All right. Melanie Ward, Labour MP for Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy, thank you for coming on the programme. Now, coming up very shortly now, Pienaar and Friends after 6 with the Sun on Sunday. It's Kate Ferguson and the Mirror's Mikey Smith. And before that, when is it acceptable to be sat at a bar on your own? A pub in Manchester has got a view on that. And we're hearing the view of the Sunday Times' Charlotte Ivers. It is 5:47. I'm John Pienaar on Times Radio.
John Pienaar at Drive on Times Radio.
Now, it is a festive first for the UK. The Sunday Times is going to be publishing Santa's Extra Nice List next month. And you can nominate the names or names of the special children in your life and see if they make it onto that list this year. To do that, just send their name to santa@thetimes.com/Santa. It's now 5:49. Let's look ahead to breakfast on Times Radio tomorrow with Kate and Stig. And Kate's here. Hello to you, Kate.
Hi, John. I hope our names will be on the special list.
That goes without saying, Kate. Of course it does. I think you put Santa off when you talk about it too much, though, so you've got to be discreet.
Okay, I'll be quiet about it. Sorry.
No, I hear what you say, and so does Santa. What about tomorrow? What's coming?
Well, we've got lots on the programme tomorrow. It's been pretty defence heavy, hasn't it, throughout the day today, with John Healey's press conference this morning and lots of talk about Russian and Chinese interference. So we'll be hearing from a number of defence experts on the programme tomorrow to work out where the threats really lie and what the government needs to be doing, looking a bit beyond just some of the things that have been announced today. We'll also be taking a closer look of the potential deal around Ukraine and Russia. What might America be proposing? It looks like there could be some pretty big moves there. So we'll be keeping an eye on that one, as I know that you will be too. And we'll also be talking about gender. Jo Coburn's got a really interesting debate that she is hosting, and she's talking about gender and sort of the definition of women. And we'll be talking about that on the programme tomorrow too. So we've got plenty of mixed stories, mixed bag for everybody tomorrow.
And there always is, and it's always really worth a listen. Kate, in a moment, I'm going to be talking to Charlotte Ivers, our colleague Charlotte Ivers. The story caught my eye, among others, about that bar in Manchester, which is saying no solo drinkers after 9 o'clock. I mean, I want to just push that discussion on a little bit. I'll be talking about Charlotte, about how she feels about going out for a drink on her own. I mean, she's a theatre, a restaurant critic, so presumably maybe does go out on her own. But, I'm thinking women in particular, is there an inhibition when it comes to going out for a drink or a meal on your own? What's your take on that?
I've done it before a few times, John, and the first time I did it, I have to admit, I felt really, really obvious. I felt like everybody in the restaurant was looking at me. My recommendation, if you're going to do it, and this is what I did for the first couple of times, is to find a restaurant where you can sit at the bar, because you can sit at a bar without being too obviously on your own. Although you can read a book, you can people watch, and sometimes the people behind the bar will speak to you, even in a restaurant, those restaurants where you can sit at a table at the bar. So those are kind of an easy way in, but it is uncomfortable. I mean, I've been on my own in restaurants before, where I've sat at tables in restaurants, and it's almost like people cannot resist the urge to come up to you and ask if you're okay.
Yeah.
I had people offer for me to come and sit at their table. I had one older couple asking me if everything was all right and had I been stood up. So
Yes.
I think it's still a bit unusual for people to see a woman on her own having dinner, which is a bit of a shame, really, isn't it?
It is, because it is sometimes a pleasure just to go out and sit at a table and go into a date room and eat a nice meal.
Yeah, it really is. And also to order exactly what you want and not to be judged when you basically just want to order cheese and carbohydrate, which is usually my order. But I'll be really interested to hear what Charlotte says to you, because we actually spoke to the guy who runs this bar this morning on the programme. It's a bar in Altrincham. And his take on it is essentially it's a safety thing. He says that you can't guarantee that people, if they come in on their own, if they have an allergic reaction to something or if something happens to them, you can't contact anybody. And it's kind of dangerous. It's a risk for the bar to take to have someone on their own in there. But lots of our listeners messaged in this morning to say that they think it's probably more to do with slightly drunk, maybe slightly creepy men coming in and being a bit of a nuisance to other customers, and also that people just don't spend as much money when they're on their own.
Right. I'm sure maybe there's just a bit of all of those things in it. Anyway, good luck with the show tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Kate and Stick from 6 on Times Radio Breakfast. Now, I can get the thoughts of Charlotte Ivers, Sunday Times restaurant critic, who's now joined me live on the line. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, John.
So, I mean, what do you reckon? This story about a cocktail bar in Manchester that won't let solo drinkers in after 9 o'clock. It's called Alibi, and they say it is about safety. Tell me about you. I mean, you're a restaurant critic, as we know. Do you always take a guest when you're out reviewing a restaurant? Because it is, isn't it? Sometimes it's just nice to go out and eat on your own.
It really is. I tend to take a guest when I'm reviewing a restaurant simply because I want to eat as many things on the menu as possible. So you want to be able to order lots of different dishes without wasting too much. But I'm a massive, massive fan of the solo dinner. I think it's a wonderful thing. The only thing better in the world is the solo lunch. And I also quite like a solo pre-dinner drink as well, if you've got a book with you, or particularly if you're traveling. What I think gives me some sympathy with the position expressed by this bar owner is solo drinking late at night seems to me to be a less, I don't know quite what the word is, a less hospitable, a less civilized option. I can see absolutely why one would do it for perfectly good reasons, if you're just a bit lonely and you want to get out of the house, or if you're traveling by yourself. But I can also see that you might get people who've been abandoned by their friends because they're being a pain in the neck and have decided they want the party to keep on going. And that can be a massive problem for a bar.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there can be all sorts of reasons for it, can't there? I somehow imagine that maybe, again, women in particular, maybe young women in particular, confident young women now, would be perhaps more likely to just go out without a second thought and have a drink in the nearest bar, less worried about being hassled and that kind of thing. Or is that not the case? It must be the case.
I think certainly that is the case, that now people are a lot more comfortable solo dining and drinking. But I wouldn't say it's a complete cultural norm. You do occasionally get people who will speak to me and they'll sort of say, oh, I could never solo dine. I would feel like everyone was looking at me. I'm so anxious about it, which I find rather odd. I think everyone is so wrapped up in their own lives that actually no one really cares what you're up to. And if they do think of you, Jeremy King, the famous London restaurateur who set up the Ivy, the Wolsey, all the kind of great restaurants of the 90s, he always says to solo diners who say such a thing, actually people are looking at you and thinking, wow, that's so elegant, that's so chic, I wish I could do that. And I think that's true.
Oh, you go out for a living, or a big party a living. For you, when you're out, let's say you go out alone to have a meal in a restaurant with the idea of just weighing up what it's like. You're there doing a job. Obviously, you want to enjoy it too. Is it as easy for you to be served on your own in a restaurant as if you did have someone with you or a man with you?
I think it's easier, if anything, because partially you have more time to make eye contact with the waiter. You tend to get in and out a lot quicker, which again is a shame. It's nice to sort of take your time over a meal, but I find it quite hard to eat with one hand if you've got a book in the other. So you do inevitably end up moving a bit faster. And as well, actually, in a lot of places, restaurants don't love solo diners unless they've got a bar, because they take up as much space on the table as two people, but obviously the bill is lower. You're not going to be drinking drinking as much as well, so it may even be less than half. So often, if you're solo dining, you'll get served incredibly efficiently because, frankly, they want you out.
And on the sort of hassle factor, I guess it will have, it depends rather what the bar is like. But some bar is maybe a place where you're more likely, let's say on your own, is more likely to be hassled in one bar than another. And maybe it's hard to know which is which, but I guess it's some sort of thing to do with the vibe, what seems acceptable.
I think it is, and I've got no idea about this man's bar. I'm sure it's perfectly lovely and civilised, but I do sort of think it is down to the landlord to establish the right atmosphere in their pub, to establish zero tolerance for anyone who is being a pain in the neck or harassing people.
To intervene, you mean, to step in?
Exactly. To intervene, to have a very firm no tolerance, one strike and you're out policy. And how people want to go about that is their own choice. But I reckon there are several things you could do before banning solo drinkers, which would be better and less exclusionary.
Yeah, what would they be? Useful tip.
I think the big one really is the one strike and you're out thing. I've seen really popular pubs in central London do this, and there's a reason people coming back to them, because they are just this fantastic atmosphere. If someone is harassing, you get the bouncer, you get the manager, and they're just out, and there's no negotiation on the door, and you don't necessarily actually have to ban them for life. A lot of the places that do it best will just send people off to have a think about what they've done, and then, if they want to come back next Saturday night, they'll be given another chance. But I think the minute you start negotiating with people who are causing problems inside, it's game over. You've got to be very firm about it.
I must ask you now I've got you on the line talking about your restaurant reviewing, Charlotte. I mean, now you are a nationally famous an influential and even powerful restaurant critic. Do you have to, when you go to a restaurant, disguise yourself? Do you wear dark glasses, maybe a dark wig or a hat over your eyes?
Gosh, there were some American restaurant critics about 10 years ago who used to have fake credit cards and wear wigs and go back to the same place sort of 5 days in a row and order the same thing and wear different disguises, check they're treated the same. That is not really how it's done in the UK. It's much more of a sort of gentleman amateurs thing. And I don't particularly disguise myself. I will book under the name of the person I'm going with, not my own name, to not allow them to prepare. Often, if I think it's somewhere that's particularly sort of new or heavily PR'd or likely to recognise me, I'll sort of tie my hair up, because I think probably my hair is one of the most recognisable things about me, and that can get you a fair bit through the meal.
What a glamorous thought. Good to talk to you, Charlotte. Take care. Charlotte Ivers there. Pienaar and Friends are coming up.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the times.
It's 6 o'clock. I'm John Pienaar. Welcome to Pienaar and Friends. Tonight, that's Kate Ferguson from The Sun on Sunday and Mikey Smith from The Mirror. And you, very happy to say, we're going to be crossing to the States after the news at 6:30, catching up with all that's going on there as well. And keen to hear from you throughout the whole show. Send me a text, send me a tweet, and let's chat after the news with Laura Cook.
This is Times Radio.
Thank you. podcast.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with IG.
It is good to have you here with us on Pienaar and Friends, an hour of good conversation in good company. Tonight, that is Kate Ferguson from The Sun on Sunday. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Great to see you back. And Mikey Smith from The Mirror. Hi, Mikey.
Hello.
I'm going to start with you, Kate. What's your thought for the day?
My thought for the day is the French hate us, have always hated us, will always hate us, and every government comes to this conclusion in their own time. I know we're going to talk about this a bit later, but we wanted, as Britain, as a proud military country, we wanted to be part of this new Europe-wide defence deal where we're going to go and start building more weapons, putting more money into our defence industry to arm us up to the teeth because of Putin.
Try and get some of the EU's €150 billion fund.
Yeah, they've got a €150 billion fund. You know, we've got our own fund, you know, and we wanted to bid for it because we've got a really good defence industry. And the French have said, no, thank you very much. And it just strikes me that with each government, when they come into office in number 10, the kind of scales eventually fall from their eyes in terms of the French. At first they think, Macron, he seems like a nice chap. I can do a deal with Macron. I'm a nice chap, he's a nice chap. Keir Starmer probably thought, we can do business together. It's that horrid chap Boris that messed it all up. Anyway, cut to 18 months later, and it's all, Macron, he's thwarted our attempts to get into this defence deal. He's harming Europe's own, defence interest, military interest, just because he's, a French protectionist that wants all of that trade for himself. So the French, they've always hated us. They've tried to invade us. We're our historic rivals, and they just always will, really. And the sooner a British Prime Minister realises that, really in their own interests and the interests of our great nation, the better.
Right. I wonder if that's entirely fair. I mean, clearly, the French were the country that invented the word and the idea of chauvinism, right? We're looking out for your own and yourselves. And like leaders everywhere, I think there's maybe more of this where France is concerned for different reasons, but they want their own interests. And when it comes to Britain, I don't know if it's hatred. There is certainly an historic rivalry, and there's a history of war. You hear France described as our traditional historic enemy. That is certainly true. But equally, politics is politics, and rivalry is rivalry, and interest is interest, and we're not strangers to that.
Well, two things. I'm reminded of when Henry VIII met with King Francis, wasn't it, of France?
Philip.
Yeah, Francois was there. Anyway, and they met at Field of Cloth of Gold, and it was meant to sign this pact, which lasts all of 6 months, I think. And they were meant to becoming friends, going to sign this historic deal. They were going to team up against evil Charles in Spain. But what did it descend into? After about 48 hours, it just descended into a wrestling match between the English king and the French king, because basically we do sort of hate each other and we are rivals. And one last point on what's in the French interest. It's probably in France's interest for Europe to unite and come together and scale up our military defences, because the US have left us in with absolutely no other option, and neither has Putin over in Russia. But they seem to be squandering or surrendering this clear interest just so that they can get a bit more of that delicious defence money themselves.
I'm sure you
so I doubt it's actually in their interest in the long term, but they just can't help themselves.
Her voice quivering with emotion. You don't hate the French, I'm sure.
Well, I'm wearing a beret today.
Well, there you go.
Because it's cold.
Case closed.
Yeah. What do you reckon?
What do I reckon? I haven't got a beret. I quite like the French. I think the French probably have a slight sniffiness about everybody. I don't think it's just us. I think maybe it is us, but that's mostly due to proximity.
Well, they're close. They're closer to other people than us.
Yeah, I know.
We've
but
got the channel. I mean, they've got land with other countries.
On a clear day, they can see us.
Yeah, well.
Well, they can walk into Belgium. However,
I guess they could just row across the channel.
We're just stretching this too far. Good thought, Kate.
Okay, thanks.
What is yours, Mikey?
My thought is that I've always suspected deep down that the British people are just a huge group of trots. Just rampant left-wingers all across the country, and it's lovely to see YouGov confirming my suspicions. There is obviously one poll going around today that literally everyone in the country thinks the economy is in a terrible state. There was another poll done today, come out from YouGov, on different kinds of tax. And how much the British people would love it to happen. So top of the list, a wealth tax of 1% on assets above 10 million and 2% on assets of over 1 billion. 75%. Yes, 75% of the British people would back that. Tax on homes worth more than £2 million. 69% would back that. And this is my favourite. Rachel Reeves should totally do this because it would cost nothing and it would probably give them a couple of points in the polls. An exit tax for people who are relocating themselves out of the UK for tax purposes. And it turns out all of these measures are... that's 60% would back that. All of these measures, incredibly popular. If you go down... reducing the top rate of tax to less than 40% is only backed by 29% of people and opposed by 48% of people. We love tax in this country. You know who doesn't love tax? The Conservative Party and by extension most newspapers. And the Labour government have been since before the election terrified of headlines like this. And you know what? Maybe they should have had the courage of their convictions and raised a bit of tax, sorted out the economy, and they probably wouldn't have been bashed for it quite as much as they're being bashed now. Yeah, and we do kind of find, Mikey, that the popularity of a tax or a tax idea is sort of, inversely proportional to the number of people who have to pay it. Everyone thinks someone else should pay more in tax. Well, thankfully, you don't get an extra vote for paying more tax. So voters, as a country, are very much in favour of rich people paying more tax, and there's not very many rich people. Isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of maybe that's your idea of being a trop. It's democracy in action, as far as I'm concerned. Mike is labouring under two mistakes here. Number one, Brits are in favour of other people paying tax, and as soon as it's them, they don't want to pay it. But most of them will never pay it. Most people wouldn't pay. Wouldn't pay any of these. Most people can't take themselves out of the country for tax reasons. Most people aren't ever going to have £1 billion in assets. But they still get a vote each. There's so much wrong with this thought for the day. First of all, Trotsky will be spinning in his grave, okay? If you think Trotskyism is just a bit more tax, you've totally misunderstood. I mean, all property is theft. It's not just a bit more tax. So you're basically being a bit of a Menshevik. Nothing Bolshevik about this. Second point, lots of things sound nice in the abstract. Wouldn't it be nice if that person over there was taxed loads and loads and loads, so I could get all my services over here for no more money? But as you well know, you're being facetious, really. Tax doesn't work like that. The economy doesn't work like that. Money doesn't work like that. I'm actually not being super facetious. Facetious. If you opposed these tax rises, you'd just get more capital flight. You wouldn't end up raising much more money, but you would. But that's fine. We tax people on the way out. Yeah, no, exactly, people. You heard it here first. The Mirror are absolutely happy with growth evaporating, with money leaving the country. Take your gold and leave, the Mirror says. Just maybe slot us a couple of pennies on the way out. It's a ridiculous analysis. We didn't choose you to sit opposite each other in the studio for nothing. When you put ferrets in a sack, you know what's going to happen, and that's what we want here. There is also another dimension to this, which is the number of people who say they would like higher taxes and contribute more to the National Health Service and public services and the good of the country is also inversely proportional to the number of people who actually mean it. People like the idea. Yeah, let's pay more. It's the right thing to do. Oh, you meant me? Oh dear. No. Maybe think again. But this doesn't mean me. Most of the people who will have answered this poll will never have to pay any of those taxes, but they still get a vote each. When are the Mirror going to endorse the Green Party? Zach Polanski, are you listening? Get Zach ring in, Zach. Tell us what you think. Stop clock's right twice a day.
Right, okay. Sorry, that took me a minute.
All right, guys, a lot more to talk about on the programme. And I want to mention this first, which is Times Radio's gender debate tomorrow night. Joe Coburn's going to be hosting it and talking about the huge medical and ethical questions around trans rights, women's rights, and the well-being of children who question their gender. Leading feminist Helen Joyce is going to be debating it all with Helen Weberly, who facilitates hormone treatment for children and adults who want to change their gender. It's a live debate here on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel tomorrow night. That is at 9 o'clock. More to talk about here on Pienaar and Friends with Kate Ferguson and Mikey Smith. And you, tell me what you're thinking. Always keen to hear. 6:14. This is Pienaar and Friends.
Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
We've got here with us on Pienaar and Friends, Mikey Smith and Kate Ferguson from The Sun on Sunday. Mikey's from the Mirror. Let's talk about the state, the mood of the Labour Party. I wonder if you heard this earlier on. We discussed it a little earlier. The Labour MP, Clive Lewis, he was on the BBC saying that he would be willing to give up his seat to allow the leadership chances of Andy Burnham.
We're in a quandary. It feels like we're in checkmate, and it's hard to see a way out of it.
Is Andy Burnham up for this?
You have to ask Andy Burnham.
Have you spoken to him?
I have spoken to Andy Burnham, yeah.
But I'm not sure if he wants to move to Norwich, but would you give up your seat
It's
for him?
a question I've asked myself, and I'd have to obviously consult with my wife as well and family. But you know what? If I'm going to sit here and say, country before party, party before personal ambition, then yes, I have to say yes, don't I?
Well, so there he was. He had to say yes. Apparently, he's ready to stand aside to give Andy Burnham a clear run. Well, not exactly a clear run, because who's to say he'd win, but a shot at getting into the Commons from his seat in Norwich. What do you think of that? Were you impressed, Kate?
So this is what. So I saw this press release actually in my inbox. I tweeted it in PMQs. That's it. Breaking news: Clive Lewis prepared to give up his seat for Andy Burnham. This has been the thing that has got the Westminster chatterati kind of choking on their. I'm finished. Over their cups of tea for weeks. Is Andy Burnham going to make a comeback? Who could step aside for him? Various Manchester MPs have had to rule themselves out. Anyway, here finally, come the hour, come the man. Clive Lewis says, "That's it. I'll do it for my country." So then I texted Clive Lewis.
So I actually thought to check it out.
I said, I WhatsApped him and I said, interesting. This is getting pick up. Would you like to come and do a TikTok with me on it? He goes, "No, Kate, I don't want to do a TikTok with you." I said, "Oh, that's a shame." And then he said, "By the way, I have no plans to leave my seat." I was asked a hypothetical question and a hypothetical answer I gave. And I thought, oh, well, I mean, I know we're into U-turns. Rachel Reeves is like, we're all into U-turns at the moment. But that was such a screeching U-turn within minutes. That you could kind of smell the rubber a mile off. So anyway, I don't think it looks like Clive Lewis is going to be stepping aside any time soon. But will we return to this time and time again? Is Andy going to get a seat at the next election? Could he run somewhere in a by-election? Could he be the man somehow brought in from the outside to topple Keir Starmer from the inside of the Labour Party? I think this will keep us going for years, to be honest.
It is an illustration of the reality of sort of political, boiling ferment, which is that talk is cheap. You know, I mean, around Westminster, MPs love to talk. They love to talk, and there are plenty of ears, people like us, always ready to listen. And for most of the time, you can do it without cost. You know, you can chip in your tuppence worth, and you can see your quotes in the paper or quoted somewhere on air, usually without your name attached, which is kind of the point, which makes it easier to do. And Clive said it to a BBC Live audience. Next thing you know, he's able to recoil, talking to you. But so much of this political sort of ferment is, I'm not saying it's not sincere in every case, but it's quite easy to whip up and keep bubbling.
Comment is free, facts are sacred, and there would be, if someone was actually going to give up their seat, now that would be a scoop, right?
Yeah.
And whoever gets that, I mean, that's a good story. Clive, if you ever do reassess this decision, do give me a call. But you're right, look, lots of people in theory will say, yeah, we can find a seat for Andy, anyone would step aside for him. But you know what? I've met a few politicians in my time now, and one thing I have learned is that they're all actually very ambitious for themselves.
Yeah.
And very few... Breaking news. In fact, most of them, if you really talk to them properly, most think they could be Prime Minister one day.
I know, yeah,
they really do. You know, from the most humble backbencher, there is no end to their the sights they have for themselves, their ambition. It's soaring. So I just think it is actually quite unlikely that someone will fall on their sword, as it were, and give Andy their seat.
I don't think it's impossible. I think maybe towards the end of a term, some people think they quite like it in Westminster and would love to have a seat in the House of Lords one day. And so maybe they step down when they could have fought their seat. I think it's extremely unlikely to happen before, and certainly this early before an election, because one thing we know about the British public is they hate people being parachuted into their seats, especially at a by-election, and especially at a by-election that's been called for no good reason.
Yeah.
So I don't think Andy Burnham would thank, if he does have ambitions to come back to Parliament, I don't think he'd thank anyone who chose to, clear the way for him. I don't think that would be helpful.
If you're an ambitious MP and you decide you're going to sacrifice yourself to open the door to Andy Burnham, because there aren't many others outside Parliament who are being talked about as potential leaders, you'd have to be pretty sure that Andy Burnham's going to go on and become the Prime Minister, or your hopes of a peerage, they don't really stop moving, they go backwards.
Well, I mean, he could be leader of the party and give them a peerage. That is possible.
Yeah. I mean, you have to assume. Well, leader of the party
to assume he
would have
take
to be out of office, wouldn't it? It would have to be leader of the party and
in opposition.
And in opposition.
Yeah, I mean, either way, as long as Andy's
that's a pretty distant bet, isn't it?
Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, is he going to be writing checks he can't cash there? Like, I'll give you a peerage, just give me your seat. What if he doesn't become leader?
You seem shocked by there being quid pro quos in politics.
No, I just don't sign away. Don't give away the house before you've got the money in the bank.
And it is a feature of leadership contests, I think, on both sides, that the sort of workers and helpers of whoever the candidate happens to be goes around promising all sorts of stuff. Yeah, peerages, dukedoms.
Really?
Well, maybe not perhaps a dukedom, but I hear there's one going. But I'll move on from that. I mean, the chairman of the National Trust, whatever it happens to be. There's so many quangos that someone might just fancy, and they do promise them.
Yes.
Hand over fist. As for the mood in the background, whether or not it's attributed, and in this case it isn't, but this is our very own Anna Mikhailova, whose conversations are always solid gold. She had this to say, told me this on the programme earlier.
One MP said there's absolutely no guarantee that Andy Burnham would win, and was making that argument, and which is fascinating considering the fact that Clive Lewis has a 13,000 vote majority, and the Greens were second in that seat, but were nowhere near. So the idea that the Green Party has come so far, and of course it has in its polling, is really significant and really interesting. And then I had someone in government basically saying, "Well, bring it on then," kind of being sort of giving a lot of bravado about it. But it's got people talking, but it's got very few people talking about Andy Burnham as an option in the same way. I think the general mood has just been continuing to talk about Keir Starmer, the problems of the last few weeks, and MPs are just really, really worried about the budget next week. They're seeing that as a very, very crucial moment and point of danger.
Now, she was talking about an MP who was so despairing that he or she was willing to throw the towel in altogether, just walk away from Parliament, which is not something I've heard before.
What, quit early?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, possibly. It wasn't. I don't think she pushed too hard on whether this was utterly sincerely meant, but that seemed to be the suggestion.
Look, there's no doubt about it that Labour MPs are pretty bloody depressed, and they, the polls speak for themselves, really, or knock any street and it speaks for itself. Support for Labour has absolutely plummeted. People think this government is inert. They think they can't make decisions. When they do make decisions, they U-turn on them. It's like all of that equivocation that should be going on behind closed doors, all of the, well, what happens if we do X, that might be bad because of Y. It feels like that's all being played out for us all to see. That income tax U-turn being the latest example of it. I have a very basic take on this, but I think it's true, which is I think the British people for a while now have wanted a political, somebody to just really lead this country, someone to make decisions. In fact, they don't even have to always be the decisions they agree with. They want someone to take decisions and be able to force through change. So Boris Johnson, against the odds, got a pretty decent majority. Yes, he promised to deliver Brexit, but that was about forcing through an actual decision after years of this quagmire. And they gave him a majority no one really predicted. And then this Labour Party, they gave him a thumping majority. Again, it was this sense that the Tories were just navel-gazing, arguing among themselves, and they hadn't got anything done. And I think that they wanted Labour to make some decisions, take some tough decisions, sell them, and kind of earn their place in number 10. And I think people's frustration with Labour isn't just they think they've made the wrong decisions, it's that actually they think that this government's paralysed, it's inert. And so if it can't do anything, all right, fine, let's give the other bloke a try.
Yeah, even those who are sympathetic to the Prime Minister sort of join in, a similar variant of that argument, that what the government needs, whether you like them or whether you don't, is a clear story to tell. They need a theme, they need a vision that people can see and rally to, at least understand and have an idea, can answer the question, what is the point of this government? Yeah. And listening to Keir Starmer, they hear all these 5-point plans and various missions. They don't add up to anything that people feel they can hang on to.
Yeah, I mean, a story to tell, but more than that, like not just, what's our narrative this week, but what do you actually want to do? You tell me. You've got 3.5 years left. You've got a big majority. You've got the apparatus of the state at your disposal. You tell me what you want to do. Okay, go ahead, do it. But it's the paralysis, it's the inability to make an argument, but with that actually make any decision, tough or not, that I think is problem.
I think Kate's right. I've long thought that Labour number 10 needed a better story to tell, or to tell it better than they're telling it. I think they're doing a lot of things that in time people will probably quite appreciate.
Yes.
But they're things that take a long time and aren't flashy. You don't have, lots of things to shout about on a day-to-day basis. I think there's maybe an opportunity at the budget, if Rachel Reeves and number 10 wanted to take it, to, after, to turn this sort of climb down on income tax and, rewriting the budget at the last minute, to turn that into part of that story. Look, we've listened. We know you want something more radical. Here's what we got. This is and pick a big change in the budget and make that into the start of, we're doing something different. We're doing what you're asking for.
What sort of thing?
I mean, the mansion tax would be a start, because that is not only, I think, something that would be popular. It's also something that's symbolic. This is a government that is. Keir Starmer keeps saying this is going to be a budget with Labour values at its core.
Broad shoulders, bearing the weight.
Exactly.
Again,
and you can make a narrative behind that. Even if it doesn't pick up that much actual money, say it quietly, it would be a symbolic gesture, I think.
Can I just say something? I think that is the most depressing thing I've heard. Because I think if you think the point of a government, it can literally hang its whole argument, its whole decision-making, just on let's just raise that tax because it looks like we're bashing the millionaires, whatever. I just think that's deeply depressing. A government should be there to, improve housing or improve our lives or do something radical on education or restore control to borders that have been in chaos for years, or grapple with what the state should be there for. If you think Labour can quote unquote relaunch and be radical, not with this vision of how it can make things better, but just how it can kind of take a few pennies from someone else's piggy bank, I'm sorry, I honestly think that is the most depressing thing I've heard in a very long time. Because what you're doing there is just a cheap shot. Be here today, gone tomorrow. You're still not grappling. You can say raise this tax because you could do something interesting with that money, but saying raise this tax, whisper it, might not even raise any money. Like, that is what's depressing.
But I think George Osborne used to call every time he used to cut things for poor people and cut taxes for the rich. He used to call it a basic issue of fairness, and that went down quite well in certain circles. I think Labour could reclaim the idea of a basic issue of fairness if they wanted to, and if they had if they had, let's say, the cojones to do so, they could reclaim that idea of fairness in the country, which I think a lot of the country have come to the conclusion that this country isn't being run fairly on most people.
All right, that was the budget submission of Mikey Smith from the Mirror. We're going to be stateside in a minute because we've got a lot to talk about there, but that's after we hear from Kate Borsa, who's up next, coming on at 7 o'clock. Hey, Kate.
Hi, John. We'll talk defence and everything associated with it today after this Russian spy ship was revealed by John Healey to be near UK waters. Again, we'll speak to the former Defence Secretary Liam Fox about that, as well as the Defence Committee's review that we've heard plenty of detail on today. We've also got a fresh update on this secret US Ukraine-Russia peace plan that was revealed by Axios, the American political news site, yesterday. One of the journalists who got the scoop is joining us tonight. There is more to come concerning territory and also Ukraine having to give up some weapons as well. So we'll get into the detail of that at 8 o'clock and what the fresh understanding is. That is, as a meeting is set to take place with US Army officials, Zelensky and President Zelensky in Kyiv tomorrow. President Zelensky has been with Turkish officials today. We'll talk about that Scotland result, John, because we just can't stop talking about it. Pat Nevin joins me, who I trust implicitly, a Scottish footballer, and also here to talk about the kind of longer term effects of what that does for football in Scotland, domestically, internationally, going forward. We'll also talk ultra processed foods as well. This is the world's largest review of ultra processed foods. In the UK and US, more than half the average diet is full of UPFs. If you're younger and poorer, 80% of your diet consists of ultra processed foods. The world's largest review has found that now UPFs are linked to harm in every major human organ. When is the message going to get through, I suppose, on ultra-processed food will be a question worth asking. We'll also look ahead, actually, a couple of movements on the European Convention on Human Rights and what the UK Home Office needs to do in reshaping that. Yvette Cooper's had a bit to say with her German counterparts in Berlin about that today. And the man responsible in UK government for reforming the ECHR, Jake Richards, is on the way to Strasbourg, and he'll be discussing this specifically. So we'll talk about the kind of legalities, the issues involving that in the show as we look ahead to what we might get from him. All right,
all of that and a little more coming up at 7 o'clock with you, Kate, here on Times Radio. Now, before we carry on and go stateside and talk to a colleague over there, let's get the news at 6:32 with Laura.
Times Radio Drive with IG. Invest more, pay less with zero commission on all stocks and shares. Search IG.com to find out more. Capital at risk, other fees may apply.
And here with me on Pienaar and Friends, I'm John Pienaar. I've got here Mikey Smith from the Mirror and Kate Ferguson from the Sun on Sunday. We're going to go stateside in a minute and look at one or two stories that are bubbling over there. I'm going to start with the story of Ukraine, because there's been some reporting earlier on. It started earlier on, some hours ago, on the website, as our own Kate was mentioning. Axios said there was a new peace plan in the offing, that the Russian side and the American side, some of President Trump's team, have put together a new plan for an end to the war in Ukraine. We know little about it, except it does seem to be moving closer to Moscow and I suppose by definition further away from Ukraine. I can welcome to the programme now, to Pienaar and Friends, Daniel Lippman, who is the White House and Washington reporter for Politico. Hello to you, Daniel. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Always welcome. So I don't know how this is running where you are. There's a new American-Russian plan for Ukraine. I don't know how new it is, but from what we see reported by Reuters, I think that the Moscow side seem to be reasonably pleased with what's being discussed. Do you pick up anything more on the substance of this?
Yeah, so this seems to adopt a lot of what Russia has wanted. We're still trying to figure out what's actually in the plan, but it indicates that Trump is, again, interested in solving this conflict. He wants to get that Nobel Peace Prize he talks a lot about, but it doesn't seem to have had a lot of input from the Ukrainians. And so that you need, if you want peace, you need both sides to agree to it. And so this may be just another pie in the sky effort that doesn't actually go anywhere.
It does seem, doesn't it, that the Ukraine haven't been especially in on the conversation, nor have European leaders who have been meeting regularly on some sort of cooperation if and when it comes to a ceasefire. They're not fully at all in on this. Although, if we talk about territorial concessions, that clearly means something more than Volodymyr Zelensky's been ready to give away. He has been contemplating a freezing of the line of contact at the battle line now, while the ceasefire begins and further talks continue. Further territory means giving, I guess, doesn't it? It means giving Russia more than they've been able to take by force.
Yeah, this is what we call rewarding bad behavior, and that this is not, he has his own domestic pressures and political reality he has to think about. He is weakened because of a corruption scandal involving his administration, but he was not elected to give away land, and so both sides have to feel like it's a good deal, or else it won't stick, and you'll have a ceasefire that will collapse in a few weeks or a few days. And so this is Trump trying to kind of bend and pressure Ukraine into accepting this, or else he will say, oh, I'm not going to give you more aid. But this does seem like a backdoor deal that may not go anywhere, but at least Trump is trying.
Yeah, I mean, the reporting that we have seen talks of America putting the pressure on Kyiv to go along with this latest deal, which makes you wonder, what does pressure mean in this context? Because America at the moment it has stopped giving military aid to Ukraine a long time ago. There has been a willingness on the part of the president to sell weapons, if not directly to Kyiv, then to Kyiv's friends to pass on. I wonder what pressure means in your view, Daniel.
Yeah, I think it could mean potentially halting those military sales to Europe as a pass-through. It could mean economic aid that could get halted. It could mean reducing intelligence sharing. And so it's the same types of cooperation that we have long seen the U.S. do with Ukraine. But remember, Trump has long kind of had a soft spot for Putin in his heart, and he's said it many times that he likes him and he respects him. But he also feels like Putin has yanked his chain around a bunch of different times, to the point that Melania Trump, the First Lady, has said to Trump, do not trust Putin. He's continuing to bomb Ukrainian cities.
Can we now just move on and talk about the Epstein files and see where we are with all of that? Because where we seem to be is that the Senate have given their okay to this legislation to open up the Epstein files. That was after, of course, the House of Representatives did the same thing. And Donald Trump is saying he's going to sign this. And so you'd imagine, well, that maybe you might imagine that's going to open the door to the publication of these tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of documents. But that's not necessarily the case, is it? What's the feeling on what the next step looks like?
So there's a deadline in this legislation of December 19th if this bill is signed today. We don't know exactly. Trump has a window to decide when and how to sign this, but he has indicated he's going to. And then DOJ has to publish any files they have a month from today. But a lot of these files, they've already been out there. And if there is a clause in the legislation that if there is any active investigations, and Trump has ordered DOJ to look into Democrats' ties with Epstein, then those files can be exempt because of prosecutorial confidence and confidentiality. And so there may be a lot of files released in the next few weeks, and then we may be back to square one here.
Yeah, and the decision on what files would have to be held back, that would be a decision inside the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and Trump has shown very clearly that he is very willing to influence the Department of Justice. It used to be kind of a nonpartisan government agency, but it's been unleashed on Trump's enemies and opponents and political rivals with Pam Bondi as the Attorney General. And so there's no indication that would be anything differently here. And so I think Trump, it's ironic, of course, that Pam Bondi would be trying to redact these files, given that she, a few months ago or before, she took office, she was saying, release all the files. I have the client list on my desk. But they changed their mind, and then they changed their mind again.
Yeah, Kate Ferguson and Mikey Smith are here with me. Kate.
Daniel, I had a question about this. So with these Epstein files, we've not heard anything really that massively implicates or embarrasses Trump too much that's in them. So given that, and given that he talked about the need to release them in opposition, so much of his base wants to release them, I just don't quite understand what the cause of the reticence is. Is that clearer to you? Why he hasn't just made more of a thing of this and released them earlier, given it's not like we've had loads of leaks saying he's named lots in them?
Yeah, that's been the major question that Republican political consultants and people around Trump have been wondering. That in the interest of political expediency, it would have been much easier for him to just get on this bandwagon a long time ago, or stay on it, I mean. He was embarrassed by that letter, that bawdy letter that he allegedly wrote to Epstein for his 50th birthday. And that came out because of this whole debate. And he is suing the Wall Street Journal to kind of put in a stake in the ground and say, I never wrote that letter. I never drew this, when all the evidence is that he did. And so he may have not been wanting that to come out. But this was someone who was close to Epstein to the point where he is saying, I kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago, when there are emails from Epstein that have been released last week that contradict that. Although the person who's saying that is Epstein, who is a criminal, and was a criminal, and so you can't really trust every time a criminal opens their mouth.
Yeah, Daniel, a lot of people are asking, I think not unreasonably, if there's this huge pressure principally from the Democratic side, it's not just from the Democratic side, it's coming from Republicans too, and that's what forced Donald Trump in the end to give way. But the pressure from Democrats, how do they address the question? You could have opened this under the last president, under Joe Biden. He could have opened these files in exactly the same way. In which case, why didn't that happen?
Yeah, we haven't. That's a great question, but we're not hearing that question a lot in D.C. Because the Biden administration basically ended almost a year ago. And so their base was not as interested in this story of releasing the Epstein files. This has been driven by one Democratic congressman on the Democratic side, Ro Khanna from California, who has presidential aspirations. But Biden never knew Epstein. There are a bunch of Democrats, like former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who's had to step back from public commitments because of his being mentioned in all of these files. And so I think that America often looks forward, and Trump is the one every day. He says, I inherited a terrible economy and so many wars from Joe Biden. I've had to clean up his mess. He blames Biden basically every single day.
Okay, Mikey.
Daniel, the president's been on quite a journey with this issue, going from, I guess, on Friday saying, he would do terrible things to people who voted for it to be released, to on Monday saying, oh, I don't care, you may as well release it. Of course, there will have been mounting pressure on him from his base. Do you get the sense that there was anything else other than just the fact that he doesn't like to lose?
Yeah, I think he had to change his mind, or else he would have been embarrassed, and he wasn't going to have to. He would have had to veto this measure. He could tell where the political winds are going, and so he knew he was going to lose, and he wanted to change his mind on the issue. And so he's a pretty politically flexible person, but because he always wants to be on the winning side for his own ego. But he knew that this was going to get passed, and Congress would have overrid his veto if he had to veto this. And so he did not want the black eye if that had happened.
All right, Daniel, stay with us if you can. It's great to have you here. I want all of us to talk a little bit about the spectacle, because it has been a spectacle, of the way the president has sunk his teeth into journalists around him at the White House, in one case on Air Force One, because they seem to be asking questions that he didn't like one little bit. How do you deal with that if you're a journalist? You can tell us. You're a White House correspondent. We can compare notes a bit from our side of the pond as well. You're listening to Pienaar and Friends on Times Radio.
John Pienaar on Times Radio.
So we got Daniel Lippman here with us from the other side of the Atlantic, Washington reporter for Politico, here in the studio on Pienaar and Friends. We've got Kate Ferguson and Mikey Smith. What is it like if you're a journalist dealing with the president, and of course this president in particular? Hard to forget what we saw and heard yesterday, the way the president in the Oval Office, journalists all around, dealt with a female ABC News reporter who asked a question he didn't much like.
You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter. As far as the Epstein files is, I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I turned out to be right. But you know who does have? Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who ran Harvard, was with him every single night, every single weekend. They lived together. They went to his island many times. I never did. Andrew Weissman here. All these guys were friends of his. You don't even talk about those people. You just keep going on the Epstein files.
And that was his comeback on the Epstein file. I didn't like the question. And when it came to the Saudi Crown Prince and the question from the ABC reporter about the report from American intelligence that the Crown Prince was ultimately responsible for the murder of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Well, she was accused of asking a rude question. She had her news network threatened with having its licence removed and all of the rest of it. Dan, were you there in the Oval Office at that time, I wonder?
I wasn't there then, but of course I sympathize with all these reporters getting their heads chopped off, or bitten off by Trump, rhetorically speaking, I have to say.
What is it? Tell me, what is it like there in the White House press corps, going in and out of the president's office, going in sometimes to the cabinet room, because he's certainly accessible to questions. He gives endless, they're called sprays, these sort of impromptu type news conferences from one journalist after another, and then yet again in the cabinet room. So questions are asked, but you ask the wrong one, and you've got a chance, as you said, to get your head bitten off. What is it like working in that particular environment at the White House?
Well, it's tough because you haven't had a president who has gone after the media as much as Trump has in many decades. You'd have, even with Richard Nixon, he had an enemies list, which had some journalists on it, but he kept that quiet mostly, and he did not, he was much more respectful in public. And so Trump has no filter. He, a couple of days ago, he said, he called a Bloomberg journalist, a female journalist, piggy. And so this is the type of person we're dealing with. And you just have to maintain your calm, that you're doing your job. You can't lash out yourself. So you have to respect the office of president, even if he is stooping below it. And so that's kind of how I view it, where you don't take it personally. This is, he doesn't have anything against you personally often. It's just your news network and your fair reporting.
It's not personal, it's business. I mean, how would you, for example, Kate, if you were in the White House, which you could easily be, how would you deal with that?
I think it must be so hard. I mean, we're all quite unflinchingly polite in the British political lobby, and we're quite used to being treated with respect by all political parties, whatever paper or broadcaster you work for. And also, we treat our subjects with respect, all politicians with respect. And honestly, I mean, Donald Trump is a huge character. This is a big kind of silverback gorilla, a beast of a man. And if I was on his plane and he turned around and said to me, shut up, Miss Piggy, I think, honestly, I'd like to think I'd have the thick skin to deal with it. But I don't know, that's pretty crushing in the moment. So I have a lot of sympathy for that reporter, because if kind of Keir Starmer did that to me, well, you can't really imagine Keir Starmer doing something like that. But in an alternative, in parallel universe, if Keir Starmer did something like that to me, I think I'd be pretty annoyed, but I'd also be very taken aback. And I think it takes something to retain your calm and your dignity, because the US president is the most powerful man in the world, hands down.
It is a whole new dimension of aggression. It is unlike anything I think any of us have seen. But in your time, I mean, you've been around. Have you guys had a roughing up from a senior politician at any point? You don't always write stuff that people like.
Oh, yeah. I mean, lots of politicians don't like what I write. And I remember, I haven't really had a roughing up, because probably the politician that didn't like what I wrote the most was Jeremy Corbyn. But there was no roughing up from Corbyn.
Did he ever say anything much?
He was very, very pass-ag. What you get from Corbyn...
Pass-ag?
What you get from rather than ag. What you get from Corbyn was he would just sort of sniffily ignore you. So I think I went to every single event Jeremy Corbyn did in his 2019 election campaign. Just me in the mail at a lot of those events. No mirror, I'm afraid. Anyway, and he studiously failed to ever let me ask a single question. But that's very different from him calling me Miss Piggy across the room. That was fine.
Yeah, I like to think, and I've never had a roughing up, certainly on camera. I've had some hairdryer treatments down the phone from people who didn't like things I've written, but that isn't the same really as being berated in public. I would like to think that if Keir Starmer, he wouldn't, but if he did say something like that the lobby as a pack would, not necessarily out of a sense of solidarity, but out of maybe that they smell weakness, would row in behind and say, hang on, that's not right. That's not a good thing to say. I think in America they're being slightly slow to pick up on this idea. They've got it a little bit with the Pentagon, which slapped all these ridiculous restrictions on reporting, and they walked out en masse. I wonder how far. Maybe Daniel can help me with that if he's still here. I wonder how close the White House press corps is to just saying, hang on, up with this, we will not put. That's enough.
That's
We're
not
done.
going to happen. Daniel, I mean, let me ask you this: the ABC correspondent who got a real earful from President Trump that time, you've got to say, having watched it, she did stand her ground. She did not back down. She looked him in the eye and persisted with the question, which clearly infuriated the president. That journalist, as it comes to the point that she's had her feedback from her fellow White House correspondent colleagues, is she a bit of a hero in the West Wing?
Well, we're all rivals as well, and so we don't designate everyone to be heroes, but she is well respected. She has been before this moment, and she is even more so now. And so you don't want to give your ground. You want to be able to stand up to authority and speak truth to power. It's a totally legitimate question. This is MBS's first trip to DC in the last number of years. This is not like this is ancient history, the Khashoggi matter. This is not 60 years ago. This is less than a decade ago. And so that's why it's still newsworthy. And so I think that politicians, they have to know that the Fourth Estate, they are very powerful, and they keep their jobs way beyond that these politicians are in office. And so Mary Bruce and the other Catherine Lucy from the Bloomberg News Service, who was called Piggy, they will be in the White House a lot longer than Trump is around the political scene.
Daniel, have you rehearsed the way you'd handle it if the death ray turns on you?
Well, I know Trump once called me a killer in private, and so, which is, I think, his highest compliment.
A killer? Did he mean that as a compliment in some way?
I think he did. That's his highest compliment for anyone. And so but it's you have to. He's called my stories fake news before, not to my face, but you just have to figure that this is. I would maintain my composure. I don't want to get reprimanded by my bosses if I spoke back to him. And so you restate your question. You try to get your question in, but you don't get in a pissing match with the President of the United States or any other.
No, and offended listeners, apologies for that very American expression. And I don't think anyone was suggesting that you should engage and attack the president. It's more about standing your ground and asking your questions. But there can be a price. There can certainly be a price for that. Daniel Lippman, let us keep in touch on these and other stories. It's really good to have you here with us on the programme this evening. That is Daniel Lippman, who is the White House and Washington reporter for Politico. Just got a couple of minutes left, so I can let my friends here do what they've been waiting to do very keenly, which is to make a fascinating and maybe even surprising prediction for the future. Can I start with you, Kate?
Yes, so everyone's talking about if Angela Rayner's going to make a comeback. Could she go for Labour leader one day, if Keir's ousted, blah, 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 blah. So my prediction is that actually, I don't think she really wants to make a full bloody comeback, and I think she won't run for Labour leader again. I reckon she probably had her fill of the Fourth Estate when she was deputy leader, and I reckon she'll be a player. If she ever endorsed, that would be huge for the person, and there's no doubt she'll probably I could see her coming back to the front bench, but could I see her running for elected leadership office again? I actually can't.
Kingmaker.
Or Queenmaker.
Or Queenmaker, indeed. And what about you, Mikey? What's your prediction?
Along similar lines, I don't think Andy Burnham's coming back. And I think,
trying to or wanting to.
I think the key bit in what Clive Lewis had to say was that he hadn't spoken to Andy Burnham about whether he's coming back or whether he wanted to move to Norwich. No offence to Norwich, but I think Andy Burnham quite likes where he lives. I don't know if you've noticed, he likes that. He likes where he is.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's any chips and gravy in Norwich. So
almost certainly not. But I don't know. And I think that's a bit of a shame because, quite apart from him being a threat to whoever is the Labour leader, I think he's quite a good politician. I think he'd be quite an asset to the Labour Party, currently in a pretty rough state.
Yeah, where he is as mayor for...
No, I think I think it would be good if he came back as an MP, maybe a minister.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's likely to happen because I don't think anyone would like to have him in their tent.
Interesting thoughts. Mikey and Kate, great to have you here. Thanks for coming as always. Thank you for listening tonight. Our producer was Ollie Cole, the technical operator was Isaac Marley. I'm going to be back tomorrow, and Kate is up next. This is Times Radio.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.